Welcome everyone. I'd like to call this meeting to order for the Corporation Township of Whistler, January 22nd, 2025. We'll start with roll call. Councillor Hurst.
President.
Councillor Goida.
Present.
Councillor Spillis.
Present.
Councillor Bailey.
Here.
This will begin our moment of reflection. That concludes our moment of reflection. Give confirmation of the agenda, please, Ms. Whitebox.
Yes, the council approves the January 22nd, 2025 agenda as circulated and approves the addition to the agenda as follows. Consent item 6.1.3, questions received from council seeking additional information and the responses provided by staff.
Can you move for that, please? Councillor Spillis, Councillor Bailey, questions or comments? All in favor? Carried. Any disclosure of pecuniary interest today? I got one. I'm going first. That's me. It's item number 9.4.2. PD 2025-002 ZBA WDD Main Street potential conflict of interest. Nature.
So mine is for item 9.3.1, which is the heritage designation priority properties. And my conflict is specific to what's listed on the report as property number 18, which is 4726 Watson Road South. This is my parents' home, so I will refrain from any decisions pertaining to that.
Can we pull that one out, please? Let me deal with it.
Yes.
So just we'll have you in the conversation, the remainder of it. Sorry, Councillor Goida. You have one too?
I just didn't hear your reason for your conflict,
Potential conflict of interest.
potential, okay.
That's suffice. I live near the subdivision proposal. Okay, so that deals with disclosure of pecuniary interests. And who did you, I already forget, I wrote it down here, GRC, I to get ready to know what they're here, right?
I believe 10.1. We can move to.
10.1, you said?
Yes.
Is somebody, come on now. Yeah. Somebody attending virtually or did they not come
Yeah.
in person? Oh, it's Chris. Oh, don't worry. No, no. Ms. Big,
If he speaks, it'll move him down to
does he
the,
want to speak once?
yes, and then move down.
Chris, can you hear us?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Great. Would you like me to refer to you as mayor, warden, chair, GRCA? What would you like?
Chris is the one I can identify with easiest, so let's go with that. Thanks.
Thanks for joining us today, and I'll hand it over to Sam.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for the opportunity today to talk to you about two of the 6 regulatory deliverables that GRCA had to complete over the past couple of years. It's the conservation area strategy and the land inventory. And I actually have Joel Doherty, our manager of conservation lands here, who's actually going to give the presentation.
Thank you, Chair, members of council. Good morning. You can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. Yeah, so as Sam mentioned, the update today is to talk about the conservation area strategy, which is for all of the GRCA lands, not just conservation areas, but all of our 50,000 acres. So this was a provincially mandated requirement in 2021 that all CAs conduct a strategy that basically sets out all the delivery, all the guidelines and strategies to best manage our lands. And within that, then there's sub strategies and other reports that we look at. So today we're talking about the first two. So it's a strategy and then a comprehensive land inventory that was done. Again, looking at all the lands. And I think the impetus to a lot of this was province looking at the housing crisis, and part of this was to identify, certainly in the land inventory, RCAs sitting on any lands that have potential for housing. And so as you'll see as we go along, not a lot within what we have. Most of it is natural areas. So these are the 6 key deliverables. We're talking about the first 2 today, but each of these has been completed. And then further to that, we'll have other studies as we kind of move along. So it's to help manage our lands. All these have been completed with a deadline of December of 2024, and they're all filed with the province. Next slide, please. So in terms of GRCA lands, it's quite an extensive watershed, as maybe you probably are aware, 50,000 acres. It's basically, in terms of geographic area, it's about the size of Prince Edward Island. 3-hour drive, sort of north to south from Lake Erie up to Dundalk. 38 municipalities, 2 First Nations reserves, so 6 nations and the Mississaugas of the credit. It's about 1 million people population wise, so a lot of growth pressures. And so this is in part to how do you best manage growth? How do you maintain these natural areas? Best manage our lands with these growth pressures. And interesting enough, about 3% of all land in the watershed is owned by GRCA, so that's 50,000 acres. And the bulk of it is in the north, bulk of it's rural. But we do have about 9.5% that's urban, in whether it's Guelph, Kitchener-Waterloo, Brantford, and does serve as parks, fields, trails, important parts of each municipality. So in terms of the land, so a lot of it is to support the various functions that we have. So whether it's flood control, infrastructure, dams, dikes, flood walls, outdoor recs such as conservation areas, rail trails. We've got outdoor environmental education, such as our nature centers, important functions that we serve. A lot of lands, as I mentioned, are natural areas, so it could be grasslands, forests, wetlands. We've got farms, residential properties, a lot of commercial properties, tenancies. So one interesting fact, I just joined last year, so I didn't realize we own Chicopee Ski Hill. So that's one fun fact that I like to point out. So we've got a lot of interesting bits, and a lot of interesting partnerships and licenses with different groups. We've also got all the cottage lots up on Bellwood and Conestoga Lakes as well. And, one thing I'll note that we've got a lot of lands that are under maintenance agreement. We really value our municipal partnerships. And it's, whether it's, oftentimes it is in both interests of both parties. There's a lot of efficiencies where maybe there's, it's easier, better, more efficient for a municipality to look after them on a more day-to-day basis. And they promote and use those lands, whether it's trails or what have you. Okay, next slide, please. So focusing on the conservation area strategy. Next slide, please. So again, it's provincially mandated, but it's a high level framework, and basically it's to help guide, inform all CAs, but in particular ours with respect to this strategy, to help inform our decision making on all of our lands. So really taking a deep dive into, property by property, and then applying strategies that may be applicable to all. And then we certainly have maintenance agreements and specific management agreements that, may be specific to certain properties. So it directs programs and resources, again, to all of our land holdings, and provides future direction and actions to meet our objectives. And again, to satisfy provincial regulations. Next slide, please. So within that, there were 5 key strategy objectives. And just kind of quickly go through each one. So the first one, managing our land holdings in compliance with all federal, provincial, municipal regulations, policies, and guidelines. So this is, whether it's zoning bylaws, species at risk, planning act, what have you, all those. So always constantly reviewing, updating our policies, looking at our strategies, and making sure we conform to each of those. They're ever evolving, and so keeping that constant eye on things. So that's part of this. Number 2, considering the ecosystem health and resilience when making land management decisions. Again, we've got a lot of natural areas, wetlands, forests, feel those pressures from development, and or, balancing our flood control needs, making sure that our lands needed for flood control also balance, adjacent or abutting wetlands and natural areas. So balancing interest. Number 3, providing sustainable outdoor recreational and educational opportunities, connections with the natural environment. So this gets back to, we've got a lot of lands that people enjoy, whether it's rail trails, conservation areas. We've got the nature centers for the education purposes. So, these are very important components of certainly our lands, our portfolio. but it's really helping people engage with nature and natural areas. So those are very important to the community. Number 4, enhance community partnerships on GRCA properties. Talking about those partnerships and maintenance agreements with municipalities, First Nations as well, and service groups. So this could lead to, tourism, greater tourism, shared responsibilities, or even transfer of responsibilities that I mentioned earlier. But really the stewardship of those lands and how do you best manage those, whether it's us in partnership or municipalities or, our partners. And number 5, managing our land holdings in a strategic, fiscally responsible, and sustainable way. So again, regular reviews of the context of our lands. Do we need to buy more lands to create better, more efficient ecosystems, connectivity between natural systems? Again, the partnerships, are there areas where maybe it makes more sense to transfer land to a municipality? And just those, just regular reviews of our lands. Okay, next slide, please. So as part of the strategy, we did have a public consultation component throughout, and so that included letters to all of our participating municipalities, and I believe some abutting as well. There have been presentations like today where we reach out and convey the strategy to our partners, letters to First Nations. There were 2 public information sessions, one in the evening, one in the daytime, to maximize people's schedules. And as well, then we had a survey that was posted for, I believe, over a month or 2 months for people to comment. And the strategy was on our website with that survey, and as well, it's still been up there. So if people want to watch prior presentations for those public engagement sessions, they're still up there. So that's always been out there. Okay, next slide, please. So in looking at the survey results, this is one key slide. Just in that, looking at the 5 objectives that we talked about, having people rate them, evaluate them. Do you strongly agree with, each objective? Do you strongly disagree with each objective? What we found was most people either strongly agreed with each of the objectives. Very small, very few disagreed with anything. And the 2 I would say, or that you can see, if you look at the dark red and the, I guess, orange, my color detection is correct there. But you can see the bulk of that would be, the watershed health and resilience was most important to people. So when we make those decisions, considering the environment, taking care of the environment is key. And then the outdoor recreation, educational opportunities, that was, I guess, maybe number 2. But all of our objectives were deemed very important to the public when looking at it. Right, next slide, please. So this strategy was approved by our board in October 2024. It includes all the action items and implementable elements of the policy. Again, so following up with additional strategies and how to best manage our lands, upgrade framework to guide our decision-making about our lands. And then as well, in August, there was a board-approved land acquisition disposition policies outlining whether it's dealing with municipalities or private sector, if there's interest. And in each case, there's processes that have to be followed in public components and posting and so forth if we make those changes. And another important component to that was acknowledgement of the fact that the Grand River and its tributaries are in fact designated Canadian Heritage River System. That came in 1994, and it recognized the Indigenous and settler cultural heritage values and all of the recreational opportunities along the rivers. So it's an important thing to trumpet, promote, and that's factored into this strategy as well. Next slide, please. So the land inventory component, next slide, please. So again, this was to a very comprehensive process to look at all of our lands. We're talking about 50,000 acres, and some have been owned since, the dawn of time, I'll say, but it was, I wasn't the one who had to go through it, but there was going through a lot of deeds and, brown colored paper and things like that to go through everything. But this was the provincial requirements, to look at each piece of land, identifying location, where there's surveys that exist, site plans, maps, having those kind of linked with it. When was it acquired by the GRCA? Or was there provincial involvement in funding in the Section 39 grant? Was it expropriated? Any legal interest? And then looking at the land use categories of each parcel and and in a number of other things. So, and also too, then with that eye that the province wanted to review for housing potential, looking at current zoning, but then looking at constraints and public lands and what's around it as well. Okay, next slide, please. So then the process for coming up with the strategy, again, number of internal people were pulled in. Again, to review a lot of deeds, reference plans, agreements. There was a working group with Conservation Ontario and LCA. So that, as I understand, was kind of the front end. So a lot of terms of reference, providing guidelines, agreeing to guidelines. What is this land inventory gonna look like at the end of it? So there's that, the internal staff, there's, even engineering, accounting, planning, many others internally. So it's quite a collaborative effort. And then any external agencies like bylaws and so forth, and dealing with municipalities for input. And some of the online resources, we've got a great GIS system in-house, looking at Geo Warehouse and Ontario Land Registry. Next slide, please. So then again, narrowing down and looking at whether or not a parcel or a portion of the parcel was suitable for housing or housing infrastructure development. So again, looking at those zoning bylaws, looking at natural heritage features, and how does that land integrate with what's around it, and municipal goals, municipally owned lands, publicly accessible lands and trails as well. So with that, then the next slide. So our review went a little bit even beyond, I think, what the requirements were. So if the parcel was zoned residential, some of the other considerations were to look at those natural heritage features. Just because as zoning, maybe, when you do a deeper dive, maybe there's some features there that prohibit any future development or any residential uses. How does it integrate with trails, linkages? Looking at the OP, is it feasible to even sever the parcel? In some cases, yeah, it's got the zoning, but it's stuck, it's there, it's landlocked. Yeah, and if there's any GRCA projects. And, was the bottom part there's cut off, but were there any properties that were previously declared surplus? And that would have been a board directive by GRCA. Next slide, please. So in looking at this 50,000 acres that GRCA owns, about 493 individual pins. So if just an example, there's a lot more properties than that. So if you look at like our cottage lots, for example, we've got, 600-700 cottages. Those could be just 2 or 3 of these 493 pins. So there's a lot of properties. And then looked at the land categories, and then so going down from that 493, which is actually a greater number, down to 30 were zoned residential. And then from that, then looking at the constraints, severance capability, et cetera, there's only 7 that the entire watershed that were identified as being suitable for housing. Next slide, please. And just to kind of hit that perspective, 50,000 acres or just under 20,000 hectares, you're down to just over 11 hectares that had the potential for housing, which is really 0.001% of all that we own. Next slide, please. So then when you look at the 7 sites, you've got 1 in Inverha, just approaching Laura. You've got 2 in Guelph, 3 in Cambridge, and 1 in Brantford. And when you look more closely at them, the Inverha one already has a house on it, so maybe there is potential for intensification if that house becomes available, whatnot. Not sure. It is part of what we have a number of properties, a residential program where we've identified that these are surplus, not needed, so it is part of that wind down. So that could be something down the road, but it's a small parcel. It's just about half an acre. The Guelph properties, one is a 3-acre property that was declared surplus in 2012. It was just off Victoria Road. Another one in that Nisk area, it's an ag field. It's like Guelph, about 18 acres. The 3 Cambridge properties are basically a parking lot downtown, special policy area, servicing a current commercial tenant. And so yeah, it's within floodplain area. The one in Brantford, it's about 4 acres. And it's already part of a sale to the city of Brantford for a stormwater management pond that will help service a greater area for new communities there. So the end of the day, the exercise, I think, the province wanted no stone unturned. So it went beyond just CAs, as everyone knows, it's been hot topics. We went through the exercise and found, we've got a little bit that maybe can help that housing crisis, but overall, natural areas and what you'd expect the Conservation Area Authority to manage and own. That's it. So any questions?
All right, well, thank you for your presentation. Always appreciate seeing you in person. Our experience working with the GRCA has always been a positive one. I am not in favor of selling land. I understand you were given the marching orders and it's viewed as unfortunate, but the work gone into to identify the land shows that it wasn't just gonna turn into a fire sale. So thank you for that, because property is hard to come by, and keeping it naturalized is great for people, and I guess the floodplain component is your mandate, but yeah, so I'm glad it wasn't, a fire sale, because that would be problematic. So I'll turn it over to my Councilor Hurston.
Yeah, thanks. Very informative. I really didn't have a lot of questions. I think this is it's a good accounting of the process that was taking place. And certainly the Niska Road property's been out in the public realm a bit, so I'm not sure I have any questions to add to that beyond what I've read. So thank you.
Yeah, I would echo the comments of both the mayor and Council Hurst. Very comprehensive work that has happened, and glad there was a lot of engagement as well. So that's positive to see. I didn't know Chicopee was actually part of the GRCA, so that's interesting. We're there all the time, so I didn't even know. But no, thank you for the presentation.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. A question. Your presentation was focused on housing, properties for housing. Are there other properties that you own that might be available for other uses, such as commercial, industrial?
The review through you, Chair. The review was focused on housing. I mean, these reviews are ongoing as well, and so it is something that's never ending. I suppose if we are approached by different groups, we could evaluate. I mean, we have a number of current properties that do have commercial components. Could be like a horse farm for disabled children in Kitchener, for example. Chicopee has a commercial tenant. So the bulk of them, I would say, are probably already actively used for those uses. That's not to say if we're approached, it's something we can engage in conversations with the municipality if they so chose, but I don't know if there's any other ones that are, I'll say, untapped for those types of uses.
Thank you again for the presentation. I call the other councilors' comments as well.
Thank you.
Councilor Bailey.
Thank you. Thanks for coming today. I have a couple questions. I'm hoping they sort of fit into what you presented today. One is in our report that we have later in the agenda, but they talk about an unevaluated wetland. So in your lands that you've discussed, are there, like, I have just assumed that everything's been evaluated and it's got, certain criteria, certain standards or something. Do we have any wetlands in GRCA that are unevaluated that we don't know about? And if so, why would we not want to know, the value of them, what they're doing?
Yeah, I may look to my friend Sam to answer that one, but yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so yes, there certainly are. There's lots of unevaluated wetlands. Under the regulation, we don't actually distinguish the difference between an unevaluated and evaluated wetland. So our mapping is all wetlands. It's when it comes to a development application, the unevaluated means that it needs to be evaluated to see if it has provincial or local significance based on the requirements in the PPS. So an unevaluated wetland just means that studies haven't been done to determine its significance, but it's still a wetland. And GRCA participates in that because we regulate wetlands through the regulation, where it's going to get a bit confusing, but we regulate through a natural hazard lens now. Before we used to regulate from a natural heritage, so a biological lens as well as the natural hazard. So with assistance from the province, we used to do the evaluation. So we would delineate the limits of the wetland, and we used to help or review the evaluations and make a recommendation to MNRF. But since the province has removed us from that process, really all that we do now is we help to delineate that there is a wetland, but then it's up to the landowner to go through the process to evaluate whether it's locally or provincially significant.
So on that note, what is the difference between provincially significant, locally significant? Where does that matter?
Yeah, so provincially significant is under the provincial policy statement, so the definition of that, it has a higher level of protection, basically. Locally significant, really depends on the local OP, the official plan and the policies around that. So from GRCA's perspective, a wetland is a wetland is a wetland. But when you're looking through the planning process, having a provincially significant versus a locally significant, there's different policies and requirements for development adjacent to.
Okay. That's great, because I've always seen this as provincially significant. I think, well, what does that mean? What's, you know, how does that impact? And then something a little bit off the topic, but I'm sit on the Conservation Halton Board. And recently they've partnered with sort of health teams, especially a BC health thing, and they're looking at being able to prescribe, so medical doctors can prescribe going for a walk in nature. And then they've partnered with Conservation Halton to provide passes to go on the trails. I just wondered if that was on your radar at all, and if there's potential to do some sort of partnership like that.
Yeah, I think the same group has reached out to us as well. We aren't as far along in the process that Halton is, but it's certainly something that we're looking into.
I think it's
Yeah.
pretty neat.
Yeah, I do too. Mhm.
Neat initiative. Anyway, thanks very much for coming.
All right, I'm gonna take us down a couple rabbit holes, just as you're in front of us. We were just at the recent Roma conference, and there was talks about fees being frozen.
Mhm.
And I'm not understanding it, but and I'll even back up, when the province took attention, I'll call it, to the conservations, it's my understanding they wanted to restrict your ability to have, those recreational activities. They wanted you to focus on your flood mandate. And this council, my memory serves me right, and others in line, we rallied around the GRC and our because the way I view those is they're revenue generating
Mhm.
and they're optional for people. So that takes some of the pressure off the levy that is put on our residents. So we were never in favor of making you stop, having these recreational facilities. But now this fee frozen thing, I'm not sure which fees it is. And if you have at a very high level, you have something you could tell us on, maybe some concerns around that, because we could maybe engage the province on that.
Sure. So it's our permit and planning fees that were frozen, and the initiative came in, I think about 2 years ago, where the province issued an order that we weren't allowed to increase fees, even cost of living, no increase. And the reasoning was to make sure that it's not a barrier or slowing down housing initiatives. I think the challenges for each CAs are a little bit different. For GRCA, leading up to before the fees were frozen, we actually had undertaken a study to look at how much cost recovery we get through our current framework. So when you look at municipal levy or apportionment, the levy covered off a certain portion, provided some support to both a little bit to planning, I think 50% to permits, mainly because we were trying to keep the level within permitting fees within municipal, like kind of keeping them close to municipalities, because we believe that if financially it becomes a barrier to getting a permit from us, that we're just going to be paying for it on the back end through enforcement and charges. So it's been a long-standing tradition that the board has always allocated some levy dollars to permits in particular, because there's a greater watershed benefit of that. So we wanted to do a cost recovery just to see where we were in terms of planning and permitting. And we found that we're actually 60% higher. 60% is a user fee for permits. And I think it was a lot less in planning. So we had put in a model, and we've had several discussions at the board too about what is the target that the board wants to hit with both planning and permitting. And the board decision, I think initially was they want to see a full cost recovery for planning, that developers pay for development. And for the permits, they want us to gradually shift to 80%, Chris, or 100% for permits? I don't know.
I mean, the overarching goal would be 100% across the board, but I think we're looking at 85%. for permits?
About 85% for who? The
Sorry, for
levies-
the, no,
levy funding or
for the
developer?
developer, for the
Chris is
permit.
bigger.
And the board also asked that that be phased in over a 5-year period, so that it's not like a shock to the system. So we actually had that study completed and we're ready to implement that. And then that's when the fees got frozen. So the fees that we have, are about 2 years old now. And they're not the new revised framework, so there's still a heavy reliance on levy dollars to help support those programs. And to be honest, even as we get through, there's still, like, from a planning perspective, you know, we provide input on secondary plans, official plans. We participate in some watershed planning, so there's always gonna be a little bit of levy
That's fine.
there. But we were going to shift towards a more cost recovery model where the user pay model. So the challenge for us is just that we haven't been able to do any increases in those fees. So the dependency on the levy becomes greater for those programs.
Well, we'd be an advocate in your corner because it's been 2 years and
Yeah.
depending on how long this freeze goes, that separation of how much levy money versus developer money is going to increase. So
Mhm.
right now, if we started out with a 60-40, 60 developer, you know, you're gonna see that erode. So it might not be, you know, as big an issue yet, but if you need support, not to, we
Yeah.
can do our best.
Yeah,
But I agree with you, it should be developer based, and I don't know if there's other models, I know we have third party cost recovery, things of these nature, you're all versed in that, so. Just want a little understanding, because we're at the Roman conference, there's a lot of us were like, I don't know, is it the gate fee when you go into, you know, Bellwood Lake, or is it, what fee is it? And everybody's, you know, everybody's creating stories, and it was just a mess for me, so I thought I had you here. The other thing I wanna maybe just ask Chris, and I'll put you on the spot, you've been Pilslinch's rep for, I believe, going on 6 years, because I came on in 2018. It's my understanding, your tenure as chair is coming to an end. So first I'll say thank you for representing us for these years and being chair and doing a great job. The thing I want to ask you is, will we be determining who represents Welfare Mouse of Pilslinch? And I believe Aaron going forward, and when's the timing on that? Because I'm definitely interested in stepping in that role, or at least considered,
So the timing, this particular, whether I'm chair or not, I'm technically on the board till 2026. So depending on how things go, I may or may not decide to get out early. We'll see. That's not the plan at this point. I still have Conservation Ontario I'm chairing for, you know, another multiple months and stuff like that. So there are links. However, it is trying to think this through. It's your turn, right? It was, and Aaron came to Guelph Aramasa. There's no hard, fast rule around this, but it should be your council determining the next person going on. So we can talk about that timing depending on how that fits, right? Technically, again, it's still the end of the term, but we'll see what goes on.
Okay, appreciate that, Warren.
Right.
And lastly, since you are here, we have some concerns down, or hearing concerns from our neighbor about some hunting going on. For my council's indulgence, I don't know if you could just maybe explain the situation slightly. I know we had a little bit of an offline conversation, but I'd just like to have them informed of what's going on, because it seems like it's a loophole
Mhm.
that people have figured out and they're kind of taking advantage of, and I have some ideas for, we can maybe try to mitigate that.
Sure. So it's the Speed River, so it's where Niska Bridge crosses over the Speed River. And it's both upstream and downstream of the bridge that hunters are getting access through the road right of way to the river. And the bed of the river is Crown land, so they have the ability to hunt on Crown land. And I think it's really because it's so close to the urban area and the subdivision there. We've had a number of complaints as well of hunters hunting up the river, up and down the river. But yeah, the challenge is they have actually legal access through the road right of way to do that. And GRCA has been working with the OPP and the City of Guelph Police, as well as the city, to ensure that clear signage on GRCA owns portions of land on either side of the river there, to make sure that it's clear that there's no hunting allowed. And we've also delegated authority to the OPP and the Guelph Police to charge anybody that's trespassing. or doing any other illegal activities on our property. So we have done those, and I think just recently too, we went and checked to make sure and put up more no hunting signs as well in that area.
So, Borden, historically, there was a turnaround on, what would it be, the west side of Nisk, of the bridge, the old Bradley, what do you call it, Badley Bridge? Never mind.
Bailey.
Bailey Bridge. And that was, I believe, your township, maintained our road for us as you were coming down Whitelaw anyways. So it's my understanding that these hunters might be utilizing this snowplow turnaround. And I asked my staff, and my understanding is that snowplow turnaround is no longer needed, as City of Guelph now looks after Niska. So they drive out to Whitelaw, turn around, come back over the new bridge. So, I feel my staff, maybe reaching out to your staff, we're, considering putting Jersey barriers across there, but I just don't know if that's on GRCA land, if it's Guelph Aramosa land. But I'd like you to just take some consideration in mitigating the parking there at the appropriate time. So my thoughts are inconveniencing these hunters, because it may be legal to be hunting that river, but the proximity to, the city, there's that seasonal trailer park, you don't have willing landowners around it. I assume GRCA is one, there's some private ones. So my understanding would be the only time you're legally hunting is if you're literally standing in the river, you step off out of that river. So I feel that the appropriate action is signage, or sorry, maybe getting rid of that snowplow turnaround parking. And then I was talking to my staff, we already have it signed, no parking. I've asked Guelph councilors to look into a shared or a service agreement with us that we would permit them to enforce our parking bylaw on Niska. But I guess I'll ask staff, do we have any parking restrictions on Pioneer? Are you encountering, I mean, you don't know, but are you encountering people parking on Pioneer Trail as well, or just park wherever, or do you know if that's kind of detailed?
No, no, I don't think so. I think they're parking somewhere on Niska as
Niska.
well, yeah.
I would also encourage staff, if we can, look at the parking on Pioneer Trail, and maybe we need to bring in bylaw prohibiting parking on Pioneer Trail. And my thoughts are, Warden, is if these people have to park a kilometer away and walk down a road with a gun on their shoulder, it's gonna discourage this activity that it sounds like nobody really wants in that area. That's kind of my thought process.
So if it's in Gulf Aramosa, we're happy to work with you. We're happy to, if someone's got some kind of proposal, get it out to our public works manager. We have no interest in this going on down there as well. So, and I think if you can figure this out and, stop it, and I'm sure it's probably the same people. Once they know that it's there, they use it. Once you can shut it down, they'll stop. So we're willing to work with your township in whatever capacity. And if there's stuff in our township that they're parking on, or just happy to look at whatever proposals you've got for sure.
Yeah, I guess lastly, it really hinges on the city of Guelph partnering on this, because we have one bylaw officer that works 9 to 5. My understanding, they have 24/7 officers, they have larger capacity. This is impacting their residents. It's in their interest to do this. We would be willing to look at this. I'm assuming this council will be willing to look at this shared agreement. It's not about revenue. It's about, this is maybe not, I'm a hunter, but it's maybe not the best spot to be hunting, especially if you're taking advantage of the technicality. Right? So I'm in favor of looking at something. I think that's all I have for you. Yeah, so thanks again.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Oh, sorry, to the floor.
The Pioneer Trail, first 50 meters or so are city owned.
Okay.
Okay, so if there's no parking, they should be consulted to make sure they don't have any parking there.
Yes. Yeah, and if we have to make it long again, to inconvenience them, but maybe it's no stopping, but either way. It's inconvenience them for sure. All right, what's the recommendation?
It's to receive for information.
Move it, please. Mr. Goody, Councilor Spillis, all in favor? All right, thank you, everyone.
you.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Always nice to see you, Warden.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us. Appreciate the opportunity to answer questions, and we're available anytime. Talk soon.
Take care. Now we're moving on to Jesse, right, 10:22. All right, welcome, Jesse.
Good morning.
We're just changing it a little bit. We're gonna have you speak to your report. And then, I'm going to hand over the chair to Counselor Bailey. And we're just gonna ask that you stay for the item number 9.4.2, which is the ZBA for WDD Main Street. It's a subdivision proposal. Just gonna have you hang around just in case council has some questions for you. So again, we'll do your report. I will exclude myself from the second component of the conversation. And, right, so I see your report's pretty straightforward. I don't know if you want to give a high levels.
Yeah,
Summary to it.
I'll give a high level, just identifying, the new PPS is now in effect. So I need to, it's now called a provincial planning statement. It used to be the 2020 provincial policy statement. The growth plan has been revoked, except for areas within the Greenbelt plan that make reference to the growth plan. Probably, yeah, so any decisions now have to conform to be consistent with the provincial planning statement. Probably, the biggest, there's several big changes. It was a complete overhaul, but I just want to draw attention to one point, the surplus farm dwelling severances. They now, when the surplus farm dwelling severance occurs, you're only allowed to have one severance per farm consolidation. So that's a little bit of a change, from what had previously been in the PPS.
Yeah, sorry, so we have one on our agenda today.
Yes.
So what you're saying is previously they could sever off the house and then maybe get another severance through this farm consolidation, but now essentially in layman's terms, you're only allowed to sever off the house. Is that what you're saying to us?
So previously, the way that the PPS was worded is if you were consolidating farm operations and you had several dwellings on a parcel, you acquired a farm, that farm, let's say, had like 2 or 3 dwellings, you could sever each of those dwellings off individually, but now it's only one severance per consolidation. So it doesn't happen very frequently, but there are farms that have multiple dwellings that would have been previously eligible to be severed.
Okay, I understand now. Thank you. Go ahead. Sorry to interrupt.
No. I'm not gonna go into into all the changes. It was a complete overhaul. And I think section 4.3 of the county report, which is attached, goes through the highlights. And that's all I have to say on the matter.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Hurst.
Yeah, thanks, Jesse. I really don't have any questions. It's pretty thorough run through. I guess time will tell when we have to navigate through all the hairy details of it.
Councilor Brent.
Yeah, I guess just one question, Jesse. I don't know if you can answer this, but in the county report, the section about impact on severances, it says the county will consult with member municipalities to determine how to best identify rural residential growth needs amongst the options for rural growth and implement any necessary changes through an official plan amendment. And I know, I believe it was in December, we submitted some comments to the county in regards to some ideas we had on policy around severances and specifically the 2005 cutoff date. And I'm just wondering, do you know, is that considered the consultation that is with the member municipalities, or is there going to be, I don't know if this is a question for you, maybe for you, or maybe for our CAO, what the consultation is going to look like? Is there going to be discussions that take place, a roundtable type thing? How are we going to engage with the county on that specific point?
Sorry, just to clarify, you're wanting to know how the county will be engaging with the local municipalities on rural residential severances. I don't have a full understanding of their work plan for their official plan review, but it's something that we could look into.
I would add to that. I don't know if we're going to see more engagement from the county. I know we've mentioned that date pretty much every time there's been correspondence, so have we seen the last engagement or is there more? I would suspect there's more opportunity as they get into the details, as they're still working through that process, but.
I'm just wondering, I know that the county has come and spoken to us before about these kinds of things, but could we use this particular component where it says, you know, we'll be engaging with our member municipalities as an opportunity to have them come to this council again? Maybe ask some of those questions and relay those ideas, you know, in greater detail with them.
I have some ideas if you wanna just, go around the table and then I'll, I suppose.
Now, my trust was going the same way as, Councilor Gordis, I was gonna suggest we bring that up another motion to say, where are we on this?
I'll just say it now. I feel that we should just ask Jesse to include it in this report, because we've had a report from you, Jesse, and I apologize if I'm either misrepresenting or misspeaking, but we had you report to council, and my memory's telling me that, you indicated that the 2005 severance date was no longer required in the provincial policy statement. So I would like to see you embed something in this report, your opinion on that severance date that we've received previously from council, and submit it in this one. That's where I'm at. I don't know if we necessarily need we could take a motion too.
Sorry to clarify, would that be an appropriate item to just to bring up in the minutes to remove the severance date and then forward minutes and forward it as minutes from council?
I don't know. Sometimes I like it right in the main body of the report, but I don't know, city council. What do you think, Ms. Williams?
Mr. Chair, we can certainly draft a motion that can accompany this report and send it off to county planning staff. And whether council wants to specifically request consultation and like what that looks like, or do we want to request them to come to our council and speak to us about it? Whatever council wants, we can add into that resolution as a request.
I'll just give you a chance and
I just want to clarify, where is this report going as of now? Nowhere. It's just come to us.
It's for information.
So we're suggesting we forward it on and add some comments to it. Is that what I'm hearing?
or we have a couple options, Councilor Spillis mentioned.
My suggestion was going to have a separate motion, but I understand where the mayor's coming from. We can, forward this and add, and council has reviewed this, correspondence from our consultant. We still, have the same concerns we made, whenever it was. And we asked for an opportunity of a discussion on, how we can, accelerate this, conservation of this, severance date.
I had another thought, just as Councilor Bailey was speaking. Would there be value in getting staff in this way? You know, it's gonna be time consuming, but do a motion as you're suggesting. And then that motion includes every resolution and report that we've mentioned. We want that 2005 date moved, because they know we want to move. There's no doubt about it. But you hear it once and 3 months later you hear it. Well, let's give them a 10-pager that shows 3 years ago we asked and all of it. And maybe that'll resonate more. Because I'm not hearing any direction on where that's going, and I'm just, so I don't know what your thoughts on that, like, put it all together.
I'm fine with that, but I'm so good.
I know for sure we have at least 2 or 3 other specific motions that. So I think
we should
it
put
would
all
be
in the
good
package.
to kind of like a recap of from, you know, whenever this discussion started till now, like, here's all the dates here's all the times that we've asked for this. We really have no clear,
No.
any kind of correspondence of where that is headed.
So why don't we have, John, what are your thoughts? You put a motion forward to, as we just discussed.
Yeah, my motion would be is that, we forward our report, our consultant's report to, the county, with the conclusion of recent, of all the reports we've made to them with respect to changing the March 1st, 2005 date, and request that, staff come to council, to, give us an overview, what would be the timing and what are their thoughts?
When he says send it to the county, let's make sure it goes to the planning committee, please. Okay, so let's move by Council Lewis. I'll have see, I'll read it once she's finished typing. Okay, a seconder for that, please, Council Hurst. All right, comments, Council Hurst?
Well, I think it hit the three things I was looking for is a formal request, an accounting of previous asks, and a request to come back with an answer. Accountability, I'm good with it.
Sorry, I'm gonna do an audible here. I really like Councilor Boyd's suggestion on the 5-year cool down period, for lack of a better term. Should we have them just at least mention it in this? So it's not that we're only asking about the 2005 date we removed. There was another part to it. I just don't want it to get kind of lost.
I think the last motion we had the five cool down period, so I think it's all embedded in there.
Right. I just, okay. That's good.
That's good.
Yeah, I'm good. I just, question for Jesse. I feel like leading up to now, we've been hearing from the county that they're sort of been waiting for this provincial planning statement to happen before they implement things that they've been working on. Do you feel like now that this has happened, other things can be kind of moving along, which may include this concern that this council has about the severances?
I don't have a full understanding of the timelines in their review, but I could, that is something, we could follow up with and get back in terms of the timeline for the review.
I can try and help. I can try and help answer that. So, in a perfect world, the MCR would have been completed by now, as the planning rules were changing, seemed like every month. You know, in the last 2 years, it delayed everything and delayed it, and I may be wrong on this component, but it may not be necessary to finish the MCR. And maybe specific components because of the new changes. The county is very much so of the opinion that they put this amount of effort and work into it. They want to see it to fruition because, you know, staff have worked hard on it. So this became effective October 20th, somewhere around there. So the writing was that all future decisions had to be compliant with the new PPS as of, so it's in there. But the delay has been the ever-changing goalposts or goal being moved, so not staff's fault, but that's why, and they will be working through it and hopefully maybe by the end of 25, it will all be complete. Does that help?
Yeah, I guess I didn't want to be pushing when they were kind of thinking, okay, now that that's in place, we can now move on, and then we're, you know, pushing.
I think
So,
we're okay. I
okay.
think we're okay. Personally.
But I'm good with that direction.
Okay, what'd you capture?
So to receive, for information, and whereas council has reviewed the attached planning report from its consultants and remain concerned about the 2005 rural residential severance date restriction. Whereas council has requested several times for the 2005 severance date to be reviewed as noted in the attached council resolutions. Therefore, that council directs staff to request that county planning staff provide information related to future consultation with affected municipalities related to rural residential severances and when a determination will be made in respect to the 2005 restriction date. And that council requests that county planning staff attend an upcoming City Council meeting to provide the information as requested.
I'll just comment, put resolutions because we're asking you to comply with it.
Yes, I have an S on the end of it and I'll include them all. Yeah.
Anything, commissioners? Go ahead.
No, I'm good.
Okay, all in favor?
Yeah. First, okay. Thank you.
Okay, all in favor? That's carried. I believe now we're on to the, let me scratch it first. Yeah, so I will hand it over to you, Councilor Bailey.
Yeah. Sorry, what number are we?
9.4.2. I'm gonna just go for a water break.
Do you have any, just jump in?
Yes.
Okay. So Jesse, we're gonna move on to, the report, the zoning bylaw amendment application, for, I don't have the address in here, for me, 11 Main Street,
Yeah,
Main Street.
Main Street. Do you have a bit of an overview you'd like to give?
I'll give a brief overview. So this is basically a report recommending that the application be deemed complete. It's not focusing on the merits of the application. We know that there's various, we know that there's various technical issues that have to be resolved through the process, particularly when it comes to, water quality. So that is something that we would work through in the process. So I just want to go into what the application is for. I don't have a PowerPoint, but it is an application for zoning bylaw amendment to facilitate the development of 21 dwelling units. In addition to those 21 dwelling units, ADUs are additional residential units are proposed to be permitted. Home-based businesses and private home daycare. There's also, the zoning would also permit stormwater management facility for the subject lands. So, as mentioned, there are various matters that have to be dealt with. I know there was correspondence regarding water quality. We did receive an email from our hydrogeological consultant that suggests that there's sufficient evidence of adequate water supply, but there is still comments with respect to anthropogenic impacts to water quality.
Anything else to add?
No.
No, okay, so maybe I'll open it up to council if they have any questions about this application. Councilor Hurst.
Yeah, thanks, Jesse. And this was like, there was a lot of information as part of this briefing note. And I guess, and maybe you touched on it a little bit, and I guess where I was struggling a little bit, from a planning standpoint, I didn't see issues, but like a lot of water related and green belt issues that had been flagged from a conservation and an ecological standpoint. I'm just curious, can you walk me or us through, how we reconcile these concerns or address them? I guess in my mind, when we approve the proposal, it seems peculiar to me, and again, I'm not that familiar with the process here, but it would seem peculiar that we have all these outstanding water issues left to be determined. Can you just maybe help me understand how we move forward with this and address them?
So there is a few stages in the planning process. Okay, so the first stage is to deem an application complete. There is a public process, so there's a public meeting, and then there's a decision. When you're deeming an application complete, you're not supposed to be focusing on the merits of the application. There are technical comments that get addressed through the process. It's acknowledged that all of those technical comments have not necessarily been addressed to date. Just a quoting section from the Act. A person or public body that applies for an amendment to a bylaw passed under this section or predecessor to this section shall provide prescribed information and material to the council. So the position is that the prescribed information and material has been provided. But there was also a decision from the city of Guelph versus Industrial Equities Guelph Corporation with respect to deeming an application complete. That deeming an application complete is a procedural exercise that does not require, in this case, the city to determine the merits of the application, but determining the completeness of the application merely serves to confirm that the prescribed information and materials have been provided to the city for its review. So you're right, there's issues that we need to work through and understand. And there will be going back and forth with the applicant on those matters and as well as specifically the hydrogeological consultant until we have a full understanding.
Thanks for that, Jesse. That's very helpful just in making me comfortable with the process. So if I was kind of summarize at a high level, we're kind of, you noted the three primary steps, and we're kind of coming up to step one of those three with a lot of work to be done. So is that a fair way of approaching it?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, okay, thanks. I think those were most of my questions, like noting that there's a degree of comfort from yourself that a lot of the water issues will be addressed as the process works itself out. And there'll be lots of go or no go discussion points at that. So I'm good with it for this point. Thanks.
Sorry, I would like to make one other point, apologize if that's all right. So while doing this, I mean, deeming an application complete does not also mean that a decision should be made for approval at a later date, or that it's a good application or is consistent with policy. That is made at the decision date.
Thanks.
Councilor Gordon?
Thank you. Thanks, Councilor Hurst. I had a similar question, and maybe just to build on Councilor Hurst's question. You mentioned, Jesse, that deeming the application complete is not based on the merits, but rather that the required prescribed information has been provided. And I understand that. However, the municipality does have a time frame that we have to, through our consultants, we have to address those technical issues that arise through that application, which is not a super lengthy time frame. In this situation, is that a concern or even a consideration in deeming it complete, that there's not enough value information within the contents of that information for us to be able to proceed through the technical review? Or is that kind of not in the mandate of so-called deeming an application complete?
Okay, so I just want to give some background. There was what was in effect Bill 109. Bill 109 dealt with I'll go to the statutory timeline. So the statutory timeline for making a decision on a zoning bylaw amendment is 90 days. Previously what was in effect was Bill 109. That basically allowed for the refund of planning application fees. What would occur with this specific application if a decision is not made within 90 days? The owner would have rights to appeal a non-decision. However, at this point, the owner does have rights to still go to the OLT to make a decision on whether the application has been deemed complete or not. So there is.
Fair, thank you. And I do have another question. I'm not sure if you can answer it, and I'm not sure if the appropriate time is to ask this question now or during the engagement component, the feedback part, but I'm gonna ask it anyway. In one of the submissions, there was a comment by Conservation Halton, and it mentioned something that the regulated area being both the wetland as well as the 30-meter setback be conveyed to public ownership. And I was just, I wasn't really clear what that meant when that comment is made. Is that they're suggesting it be relayed to the county, to the township, to the conservation? I'm just not really sure what the impact of that would be.
So there is I mean, I don't recall all the details, but there is a portion surrounding the dwellings that has natural heritage components. I just want to go to the list. Yeah, so there's unevaluated wetlands, significant woodlands, and watercourses. I don't remember what the position was, but there would be discussion on whether that would be conveyed to a public authority, but I don't think that has been determined yet either.
Okay. Thanks. That's all my question.
Yes, if we elect to deem the application not complete, what are the likely scenarios that could happen?
So I guess there's two possible scenarios. One is that the owner or applicant goes and requests the Ontario Land Tribunal to make a decision on whether the application is complete or not. The other option is that the other option would be that the owner applicant continues to address comments.
This did go before the OOT. Is there, you mentioned a precedent in the city of Guelph, would this likely not succeed if it went before the OOT?
So every matter is unique. But in reading what had occurred with the city of Guelph, I think that this one, I don't see this as having a high likelihood of success in terms of the position to not deem the application complete. So I believe, based on the decision of Guelph, I believe that the decision would be to deem the application complete.
Next question is related to public meetings. There is a statutory public meeting to do with the zoning bylaw. Changing the zoning. Is there an opportunity to have an additional public meeting for the public to comment on things such as light infringement, size of homes, things of that nature, rather than strictly a rezoning?
So the Planning Act requires one public meeting for the zoning bylaw amendment application. And that would be the public process.
So we have another public meeting run by us, or perhaps I said this of the CEO, we have another public meeting where we ask area residents that come and talk to things that would concern them, that be fed back to the consultant to be incorporated into the design.
So for you, Mr. Chair, and I think the question is, sorry, Madam Chair. I think the question to our consultant specifically is there anything that would preclude the township from conducting a second public meeting specific to maybe more of the details that would come out through the draft plan of subdivision? It would be in addition to what the statutory requirements are.
Through the chair, I've seen that occur previously, where there is additional consultation that's held. In terms of requiring that or enforcing that, there might be a little bit of difficulty, but I have seen it occur.
So, as a result of the questions I've asked staff came forward with a resolution that provides more clarity, that talks to the issues that are still outstanding. I don't so CEO, do I need to move that these be considered, or is that automatically you will take care of it?
So through Mr. Chair, it was provided to council, Madam Chair, apologies. And so I can suggest it to council just when Madam Chair asked me to read the suggested resolution.
And I'd like to also add that staff arrange a separate public meeting for give the resident the opportunity to discuss issues that would be of concern to them, such as lighting, massing.
Thanks, Jesse. I do have a question for you. I didn't see any elevation drawings. And so my question is more about, we know that at the back of the development, it's quite wet back there. We've got Bronny Creek tributaries and a lot of wetland back there. So I'm wondering if the finished grade of the development is proposed to be higher than the natural current grade. You know
I don't have that answer, but it's something we could look in, that could be looked into.
Okay, and just for council's indulgement, what my concern is that if in order to prevent flooding, the suggestion is we need to up the grade, then we're looking at bringing in a lot of fill. And because this is maybe staff can clarify, but my understanding is because this is a development application, if a lot of fill had to be brought in, our site alteration bylaw would not be in effect. Is that true?
So for you, Mr. Chair, I think it depends, Madam Chair, I think it depends on the timing of when site works are being proposed, and we would work through a development agreement that would likely also address quality control issues related to soil. So again, I think what we're talking about is for under a building permit, we see those exemptions, but there's ways that we can work through it to ensure that we have all the precautions in place for large importation of fill, even related to this type of a development.
Okay. Just my concern would be that along this process, we're kind of losing sight that this could be a large fill site that then is getting built on top of in order to, you know, help with any of the flood mitigation. So I just want to keep that in mind and know that our sort of the aspects in our fill bylaw can still apply, whether the bylaw can or not. And I did ask the question to the Conservation Authority earlier about what an unevaluated wetland is. So I guess in all the discussions we've had with some of the wetland delineation and everything, in one of the reports, it talks about one of the wetlands being an unevaluated wetland. So I guess I just want to flag that, or I don't know what the process is, but making sure that we have evaluated wetlands before we're agreeing to something abutting it. And I think that's it. Maybe I'll have Courtney read the proposed resolution that was in our Q&A, and then we can have a discussion around that.
So the report 2025-002 entitled zoning bylaw amendment application for D14 WDD. Request for council to deem the application to be complete be received. And whereas the application D14 WDD has been reviewed by the Township of Cliffland in accordance with the requirements of the Planning Act. And whereas the Township sub-consultants have reviewed the application and have raised no concerns regarding deeming the application complete, confirming that all required studies have been provided. And whereas the township acknowledges that deeming the application complete does not imply any judgment or position on the merits of the application. And whereas the application is still undergoing ongoing review, including public consultation and further detailed analysis with a formal position on the matter to be presented following the completion of these processes. Where the township expects that all concerns raised by its professional consultants during the review process will be adequately addressed to the satisfaction of the township. Therefore, be it resolved that council deems the application D14 WDD to be complete in accordance with the Planning Act, and that council acknowledges that deeming the application as complete is procedural and does not constitute a decision on the merits of the application, which will be determined following the full review process, including public consultation and the final analysis of all relevant information, and that council expects the applicant to adequately address concerns raised by the township's professional consultants in accordance with the Planning Act and the township's policies and standards, and that council direct staff to schedule an additional public meeting for this application in order to give the public an additional opportunity to provide input.
I'll get a mover for that. Councilor Sabulis, seconded by Councilor Hurst. Any comments on the resolution?
Just one technical question. Jesse, you'd noted in a 90-day window. Assuming all of this needs to take place during this 90-day window in terms of public consultations and so on and so forth, is that correct in my understanding?
Yeah, so the 90 days is supposed to begin the date that the application, the 90 days is from the date that the application was applied for. So that's technically when it's supposed to start. And then you are supposed to have consultations and a decision within that 90-day time frame.
Basically between now and April, roughly speaking, take.
But yes, that is correct. But then that is all that date might not necessarily be met as comments are being addressed.
Okay. Thanks, I'm good.
Okay. You're good. And I'm good with that. All in favor?
Thank you. Good job. All right,
Sorry, we left Jesse hanging.
thank you, Jesse.
Thank you. Okay, have a great day. Bye. Oh, I'll see you this evening.
That's not constitute participating in the meeting, thanking the consultant. So, all right, so I believe we're on to our delegates. And I'll invite Barclay Knapp and I'm not sure who is just joining. Welcome.
Thank you.
Quick round of introductions, once you get yourself gathered there.
Morning, Council. Thank you for letting us present to you. My name is Barclay Knapp. I am the president of the Wellington Federation of Agriculture. I'm also a resident of Postage Township at Concession 11. And with me is Janet Harrop, my past president, who resides just outside of Fergus.
Excellent, welcome. Councilor Gordon will be back momentarily, so I feel it's right to start.
You should.
Sure.
Okay. We can go to the next slide. Wellington County is the hub of agriculture, innovation, research, and leadership in the province. You can see the impact of agriculture in the county from these statistics. Protecting and preserving Ontario's agriculture land for the purpose of growing, harvesting, and producing food is the Wellington Federation of Agriculture's priority. WFA is the largest farm organization within the county of Wellington with over 1,500 members and works in unison with the Ontario Federation of Agriculture. Next slide. WFA recognizes the township's unique position as a potential target for large volumes of fill. This would put a strain on local infrastructure, and there are potential environmental risks of unregulated fill activities. We acknowledge that environmental concerns and potential for liability for the township drive this bylaws approach. WFA shares these concerns. WFA has engaged in the consultation process of the bylaw, delegating previously of the bylaw, and WFA members have provided input via the online survey. The risks associated with contamination or improper use of fill pose significant threats to soil quality, water resources, and ecosystem health, threats that would impact our livelihoods. Poor use of fill, particularly in the agricultural landscape, hurts everybody. That said, farmers need to farm profitably and productively to feed people. We need an approach to addressing risks to fill that balance of environmental protection with the needs of agriculture. Next slide. WFA appreciates the time and effort the township staff have put into the detailed bylaw definitions related to agriculture and the opportunity for a different approach respective to farming. However, there are a few areas that are overly restricted to agriculture, limiting farmers' ability to complete essential farm maintenance and routine farming activities. For instance, grading a farmyard or laneway following winter season could require more than $10,000 in costs to hire expertise to complete the application process, and likely almost a year of time. This seems like an overly complex process to be able to conduct regular farm activities, which need to be completed in a timely manner so that the milk truck can access to the barn or propane delivery can be completed. Going through an application process to be able to conduct routine nutrient and soil health activities, like applying compost, are also duplicative of the regulations governing compost and nutrient management in Ontario. Using compost to grow a crop and condition soil is also a climate positive activity that should be encouraged rather than encumbered. And while we understand the need to verify the use of fill on a farm is a true agricultural approach, referring every application for a normal farm practices waiver in a township to the Normal Farm Practices Protection Board to declare normal farm practice is not the intended use of that system. It is a system as established by the Farming and Food Production Act to protect farmers from nuisance complaints and untenable municipal bylaws that restrict farming and food production. Use of this by the township is tying up valuable resources that will further limit the ability of farmers to farm productively in the province. Next slide. Recognizing our shared concern and the effort invested in developing this bylaw, WFA respectfully suggests some refinement and alternative approaches. First, we respectfully suggest that compost doesn't have a place in the definition of fill. Compost, generally defined as a solid and mature product resulting from approved composting processes and meeting quality guidelines, is intended to improve nutrients to crops and organic matter and beneficial biota to the soil. Given this use, compost doesn't have a place as part of the definition of fill. Next, we would like to suggest an approach that allows for and enables routine farming activities like essential maintenance. These activities could be defined in a list with a size scale limitation and would address things like farm laneway upkeep and farmyard grading, so the feed delivery truck or grain hauler can travel in a timely manner. But also for routine activities like fence row maintenance and picking stones wouldn't be encumbered by the bylaw process. WFA doesn't believe that these types of routine activities were intended to be captured by the bylaw. However, there are with the current approaches of the definition of an application process. To be clear, we're not talking about projects like bringing in soil to level a field or add soil depth, creating new farm laneways or privacy berms. These are larger scale activities that should require some level of review. To that end, we suggest a graduated permit structure similar to the minor, intermediate, large, major approach in the bylaw, but specific to agricultural uses that would align with the information required in the application process with the size and scale of the project. This would also align the cost based on the effort to complete the application with project size and scale while addressing risk. Next slide. Building on that, and to verify the agricultural nature of a proposed practice, WFA would like to suggest implementing a review process by people knowledgeable in agriculture, and that can be conducted in a timely manner to provide a measure due diligence and minimize township liability in the province of the practice. This is a role that is fulfilled by agricultural advisory committees of council and other jurisdictions that could be the roots of such a committee in Pozzuch. It is important that a committee be knowledgeable, nimble in operation, and meet in a timely way to address the needs of agriculture. WFA will boldly suggest that we could help with this, at least as a starting point. WFA has a functional land use committee that currently reviews and comments on planning applications affecting agriculture in the county. We will suggest a similar function could be implemented to review non-routine and larger scale agricultural applications, provide comment and recommendation on the feasibility of the proposed practice with respect to agriculture production. This would be a much more feasible approach to reviewing projects for appropriate agricultural context and advising staff than using a normal form practices protection board process, allowing more timely and cost-effective yet appropriate review of projects proposed in agriculture. Next slide. If desired, WFA would be willing to play a role in developing further into details and could assist with things like developing case studies for use of fill and farming practices, refining the definition of fill, and assembling best practices from other municipal bylaws. There is no municipal bylaw in Ontario that does a great job of balancing the risk of regulating fill with agricultural practices, but there are some concepts worthy of recognition as best practices. WFA suggests that by drawing from these lessons and incorporating the Pozzuch bylaw, we could together create the best approach in Ontario. At a minimum, we would at least like to continue the conversation. Working together, we can support agricultural businesses performing regular activities and support a process to prevent dumping of unregulated fill in the municipality while protecting our resources and the environment.
So thank you. Is there anything you'd like to add?
No, I'm here as support, so yeah. There's nothing to add.
All right, Councilor Hurst.
Yeah, thank you both for coming. Always good to see you and present on behalf of WFA. I think actually I appreciate just the approach you took today, Barclay, in terms of just some suggestions of, you know, a year into this as some food for thought for consideration. I think, and from my perspective, I think it's well placed. Couple pieces from my standpoint, and forgive me, I maybe jump around a little bit, but I'm intrigued with the Ag Advisory Committee, and maybe a question of staff. I'm not aware that there's one this township at all, to my knowledge anyways, but fair statement. I'm curious, in maybe other municipalities within the county, can you maybe just share a very, very high level what those advisory committees do in terms of the functionality and maybe some experience they have had potentially with normal farm practice or site alteration reviews? And maybe that's a hard thing to answer definitively, but I'm intrigued by that, because I think, anytime we can engage the farm community in helping them, reduce the regulatory burden on just trying to run a business type of thing, but also understand, I think the feedback you provided is like these pretty basic, simple, and I don't mean simple in a negative way, but just like pretty foundational activities. That's kind of beyond the scope of, I think, really the site alteration issues with large fills that are negatively impacting the environment. So that seems like a really rambling question for you, but to circle back, it's more the ag advisory committees, how those have functioned in other regions and your experiences with them.
I don't believe we have any currently in Walton County.
Okay.
Close.
Sorry, so currently through economic development in Center Wellington, there is a subcommittee specific to agriculture, and WFA has advocated when we've been working with the county around having an official ag advisory committee at the county level, because of that's where obviously severances are approved, which is often where we would like the opportunity to have some dialogue and input, and then a lot of the local tier municipalities through their economic development will, if there's an agriculture related issue, they'll strike up a subcommittee. Center Wellington has done that, mainly related to the urban boundary expansion, but there's other issues that come up at that committee meeting. So it's kind of it's not, as Barclay said, not formally created, but through subcommittees, there's definitely been areas. Mapleton has also done that to be able to get input generally related to a specific issue.
The town of Milton does have an agriculture advisory committee. Basically, whatever council decides to put past them and ask them for their viewpoint.
I'm just intrigued. I'm not maybe advocating to start a new committee per se. I don't want to. I think that, but I like the functionality of it as of having a rapid manner to get some very specific feedback on an issue by issue basis. I think really has a lot of merit here. So I'll maybe leave that with staff to kind of ponder. The composting piece, I think, in my mind, I think that makes sense. Like that's a Nutrient Act, or Reg 63, I think off the top of my head, issue. So I would, at a high level, I would probably agree with that statement. And I like the other one that you shared around the case studies. And I think that would probably help even farming communities beyond our township. What are the top kind of 3 or 4 typical farm practices that involve? So I think you noted laneway grading, fence row maintenance, that type of stuff. And I think it would be quite valuable, both from a visual and well as a text-based standpoint, like what's this actually do? And I think that may add some contextual framework to these normal farm practices, small scale normal farm practices, to kind of alleviate the apprehension in the farming community of like, this is a big permitting process. And I don't think in my mind I never envisioned that, but I think we're both probably in agreement that we have large fill operations that have impacted this community. There's a number of them. None of us want that, regardless of where you are in the spectrum. So I think maybe not that far away on some of the stuff that you approach. So I'll leave it there, but I appreciate the thoughtfulness, and I think there's lots of good food for thought to take back from your discussion today.
Let's go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for coming today. I think it's important that you're part of the conversation, and it's a good learning opportunity for us as well to hear from you directly. I just have a couple of questions. You mentioned in your presentation partly that, routine farm maintenance seems expensive and complex. And, so I'm trying to get an understanding. So we have this normal farm practice waiver, component of our bylaw. And my understanding, although we haven't had a normal farm practice waiver application as of yet, is that correct? But my understanding is that based on the scale and the scope of the project, that there is some discretion that can be applied to the requirements. So I'm just wondering, Courtney, can you speak to that a little bit about maybe trying to evaluate what those complexities really are or may not be?
Certainly. So through you, Mr. Chair, as Councillor Gordon mentioned, we haven't had anyone apply for a normal farm practice waiver to this point. The bylaw's been in place for about a year. And we have not had anyone request it. So we would be working through it for the first time if somebody were to come forward and request that. Again, it depends on whether or not fill importation is included within what they're requesting to do. And that can add complexity to the application, certainly, when you bring in fill. And part of what OMAFRA has been trying to provide guidance on, not just to municipalities, but to the farming community, is typically if that fill importation or export is not listed within the exemptions that are required in the bylaw, typically it does require a permit. Now, we understand that there could be a normal farm activity that takes place, and that certainly could receive a waiver. So maybe that's changing grade or things like that are required. But the fill importation associated with that normal farm practice may still require a municipal permit. And so there needs to be some, probably some better education from the township's perspective on what that looks like. But certainly our consultant for some of our more complex projects in terms of looking at fill quality and turning around a review on that, they've been able to do that within a day. They've asked for 2 days to turn around that sort of an analysis. So we're certainly not talking years, we're not talking months even. Now, again, with any application, it's applicant driven. So if we don't get the information we need from the applicant, certainly that can cause delays. In addition, we have no control over other agencies' turnaround times. So if it does require a conservation permit as well. But generally, where you see the complexity is where a normal farm practice is requiring the fill importation, which in most cases still requires a permit from the municipality, and that's guidance from OMAFRA.
Can you speak to that guidance document? I'm not sure if you're familiar with it.
Certainly. So we were provided, I think it's around 5 pages or so. It's put out by OMAFRA. It's been on our website for about a year. It's on with so that folks can take a look at that when they're looking to see if their project qualifies for as a normal farm practice. And it talks very specifically about fill importation and what is and isn't, where a municipal permit is and isn't required. And just acknowledging that in most cases it is. And that's, again, goes back to environmental protection and the regulations under that act. So that's on our website, and we're happy to push that out. We're looking to do more engagement over the next year as well, and pushing that out to the public, so it's a little bit more forefront for folks to use that.
So just because we haven't had any normal farm practice waivers yet, it's hard to understand where there may be issues that are coming up, because as Courtney said, we haven't had to work through one of those yet. But I'm just wondering if you're hearing from the farming community that they are actually experiencing barriers specifically for small scale routine practices. Are you hearing from farmers in the community that there's specific things that they're being hindered from doing because of this?
I think in some cases it would just be people not wanting to follow the process as it is right now, so we don't know about it. We would like people to follow the process, and that way we can control what fill's coming and going from the township. But if if a laneway is washed out by heavy rain and it's a weekend and you have a truck coming to pick up your chickens and that truck can't get through, that laneway has to be promptly fixed. That's just one example. And unfortunately, a waiver could not be provided over the weekend, it might not be in time. And, depending how badly, we've had some really nasty floods in the last couple of Julys or heavy rains, whether you can get that fill from another part of your lane or you have to bring in some gravel from a local pit.
Yeah.
That's just one example. that comes to mind.
Yeah, it's helpful, it's just helpful, I think, to have some context. I think maybe it may not be today, but maybe over the course of the next little while, if there are sort of like some specific situations or examples that you could provide, that maybe we could focus some efforts on. We've committed to reviewing this bylaw, ongoing review. But having some sort of specific examples of things that we could look at and how those situations might be applied through this bylaw would be helpful for us, I think, to work through in collaboration with you, maybe where some improvements or revisions may be able to be made, but without having gone through the normal farm practice waiver and without really having an understanding of some of these specific situations that may be causing barriers. It's hard to be able to encompass it all without looking at it on a case-by-case basis.
Didn't really ask you a question, depends what you're going to say, so.
I was just gonna give feedback to her question. Okay, it's fine.
I'm okay.
I think what we have seen in the past and what we're hoping, working with the municipality on this issue, to your comment, is it's previously been really complaint based that we've seen issues coming forward that is this practice considered a normal farming activity. And when you get into that area where a neighbor may think this is not a normal activity, but the person who's farming that land has done this activity before and realizes that this, and has done the research and recognizes that this is a normal practice, that's where we're hoping the bylaw can show some clarity. And that's where where the waiver has come into play previously, because you don't want to be referees of the municipality. Then you're going to the practice board to look at, is this a normal practice? So we want to be part of the work that's being done up front. I've gone through the bylaw. It's very comprehensive. It's very, very detailed. There's been a lot of background work obviously done to this. And we are seeing other areas in the county that are also looking at implementing a bylaw. So, having the opportunity to do it here to help is something that we can see will be repeated in other parts of the county. So I hope that helps.
I suppose.
For a question of staff, are we getting any constructive feedback from the bylaw, or comments from the general farming community, qualified farming community?
So if you wish to share, the online survey was anonymous, so it's not possible to tell who submitted what comments. Council would have seen at the last meeting in December that we had. So that's the type of comments that we're getting. It will be helpful when we get to process a normal farm practice waiver, if it's ever required, to be able to look at what that process looks like. We don't default to the board for a decision. I want to maybe clarify that a little bit. It would be through working with our consultants. We also work internally with our staff to see if there is something that is a bona fide farm practice. There's ways to test that with the applicant to make sure that they have their necessary license and things like that. So we don't default to that, but certainly if there's a disagreement, that's the purpose of the board. And so to answer the question, we really haven't, aside from the survey results and working one-on-one with applicants, that's the type of feedback we've gotten.
Well, I echo Councillor Gora's comments, that if you have any feedback, it'd be beneficial to have that for our next yearly update, to have a look at it and to see if we have to go that extra step, as you're suggesting, having a committee type of thing to look at is right now, based on what I'm hearing, there isn't any serious comments from the farming community that necessitate creating a separate committee at this time. Perhaps in a year's time, maybe it's more, you come up with some issues that such as this, our number of farm practice, our grading, conventional maintenance that do come up as issues. That'll certainly be something that we should be looking at in the future. That's all.
Ms. Bailey?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for coming today to present. Yeah, just piggybacking on both those comments, I really like the idea of being able to engage with you to be bringing examples forward for us about what is routine. I don't know, do we fix fence rows every year? Okay, maybe we do, and maybe that's something we need to consider. Do we pick rocks, in the fields every year? Perhaps we do. That could be something to add to the list. So being able to generate maybe kind of a standard, these are typical yearly maintenance kind of things that happen. And then some of them require fill brought in, and then maybe we can be looking at some sort of different process, whether the waiver can be done on a weekend. Yep, you're good, bring in your gravel to fix your laneway. Maybe it's something that can be done quicker, where we can have a quicker turnaround. But I think having some of those examples would be really helpful, going forward to see how does the bylaw fit with some of those regular, maintenance. I have a question in regards to amount of soil being brought in to help with a field. You're talking about bringing in compost, and I know there's experts out there that deal with soil health, and they can come to the property and probably pay a lot of money to have someone give you, really good information on how to improve the soil of your land. But is there out there best practices where a certain amount of soil can be added to an agricultural field to help improve the field? So it could be for soil health, drainage, help with over-vegetation. Is this some sort of a standard that we'd be able to then calculate based on how big the property is and be able to come up with kind of a ballpark amount of fill that would be reasonable to help with soil health? So that if a farmer was to come forward and say, you know what, I need to improve the soil health, we kind of have this standard to work within. And then if you're proposing to bring in that amount of fill within this, then we can kind of expedite some of that process. Whereas if, okay, we're talking way more than what we think is reasonable, then we need to go through this bigger permit process. So I guess I'm looking to you to just, is there any guidance out there with what a reasonable amount is for improving soil health?
So I'm certified in nutrient management and do the nutrient management strategy and planning for our business. And so really to answer that question, it would be whatever it would be fall within under the regulations of the Nutrient Management Act, because it would be considered a soil amendment that would be providing not only nutrient or organic matter, but also nutrients. So it would depend on the quality of the soil, the type of soil, the slope of the soil, the amount of topsoil. So there's not really a specific number that you can specifically say, but it would be to meet the agronomic needs of the parcel of land.
But we're talking, like, can you say generally under a foot, under 2 feet? Like, is there sort of an amount you would add, a quarter of an inch? Is there a ballpark where we can say someone's proposing something that's way over and beyond what's reasonable according to soil management guidelines?
Yeah.
Something like that.
Generally, when you apply like a large amount of organic matter, an organic amendment, it's generally not more than a few inches. But I don't know if you want to get specifically to a measurement because it's really to meet the organic needs. But I mean, your question was the inches, and yeah, a couple inches would be the largest amount that you would see.
Because to me, I mean, I really struggle with what is a reasonable amount of fill to bring onto an agricultural property. And I think through basic calculations, we should be able to say, well, this is reasonable because it's going to cover this much of the area, whatever. If we're talking, you know, that's not reasonable. And then I don't know where normal farm practice, you know, waiver comes in, but to me, that's a big part of the conversation.
Well, and that's why, sorry, through you, that's why having the suggestion of an ag advisory committee was to be able to deal with those upfront, as opposed to there's a problem and now we have to address the problem, to have that conversation on what is considered normal with people that are in that business. So that was why the intent of the suggestion.
I like that suggestion too. I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
I feel there's two components being fixed there. If you're bringing in fill because the topography of the land is the hindrance to normal farm practice, then you're bringing more fill, flatten it out in layman's terms, and then the nutrient guide may dictate the top. So I don't feel that everything is the same there. It all depends on the issue you're trying to correct. So would they put the best nutrients 30 feet down? I would suspect not, right? But it would likely have to be table 1 soils, but they could pile it to flatten out a hole or something. So I understand what you're saying, like, you don't need 15 feet of nutrient rich topsoil, maybe, I don't know, but there are some practices where they need to level out the land, maybe for combines, for, I don't know what, different processes for the farm, but so I understand that, so. Okay. I'm gonna go through your slide deck here. You know, your the one that's labeled current approach, and it says restricts essential farm maintenance and routine farming activities. This bylaw is not restricting fence row maintenance. It's not restricting rock picking. And I don't know, Ms. White Fox can answer that, but has the staff investigated fence row maintenance or rock picking in any of its bylaw concerns to date? I don't know if you can answer that or not.
So for you, Mr. Chair, we haven't had any requests for that type of activity. The bylaw does make note that it's not intended to frustrate normal farm activities. So again, if we were to receive a request for that, it may not even require a waiver. It might just be the bylaw is not contemplating regulating that type of an activity, but it really, again, we haven't had those types of requests come forward.
So when we started talking like that, it was starting to imply that the township's bylaw is restricting the farmers from fixing their fence rows and picking rocks out of their fields. That's not the case whatsoever. Priority of WFA, I assume, is to protect farmland and farm practice, right? Is that fair to say? So this bylaw is also there to protect farmland. We have many instances of importation. So there's two components to this. There's the importation of fill and there's the site alteration. So we'll talk about the importation of fill due to our proximity to GTA. We have lost, did I say hundreds of acres? Would it be 50, under 100 acres of I won't say lost. Fill brought into this township has not met the table 1 soil requirements, which is required to grow food. So we're experiencing fill being brought in. It's not table 1. And that farmland, if that's the case, is lost, because now I don't know what the process would be if you had fill and soil that's not table 1. How you would get permission to grow food, or maybe just plant it and somebody turns a blind eye. I have no idea. We haven't even encountered that yet. So that's what's coming into the township. So that's what's driving this bylaw. So I feel we should be more aligned on the bylaw because we are trying to protect the farmland of the farmers you represent, not the other way around. You mentioned the improper use of the normal farm practice board. And I'd like you to explain that a little bit more to me, because I'll tell you what my interpretation of how it's being used. And this is why we haven't received a normal farm practice board waiver. We are complaint driven, as Jan, as you mentioned. And what happens is people do things, then the neighbor complains, and then staff will review the complaint. And I would assume even at that point, there's probably some review of whether this could be normal farm practice, regular maintenance, and then there's a determination that you need a permit in simple terms. Is that fair?
Mm-hmm.
So complaint to farmer from neighbor, as we're getting more neighbors down here, maybe up in Mapleton or, they're spread out more, but here they're very close. Staff attend and they investigate. And then they determine a permit is needed. this is where the abuse of the, in my opinion, the normal farm practice board comes into play. Because now they're caught essentially by the complaint and they don't want to comply. They don't want to get the permit. It is a process. It is likely challenging. That's why we recommend getting a qualified person. Then they abuse or use the normal farm practice board to try to circumvent our processes because they don't want to comply. So it's not that the township is improper use of the normal farm practice board. There'd be an argument that it's an avenue for the farmers because they've been told on by their neighbor or somebody driving by, I don't know who it is. And now they do not want to conform to this bylaw. So we don't want to go to hearings. We want to help. And I feel staff have been very supportive of people going through the processing permit to help them. But that being said, it's so important to get a qualified person and listen to that advice. And that's what they do, right? So the normal farm practice board is not being abused by the township whatsoever. Back to the site alt, the characterization of a simple lane. Do you have experience with a laneway that maybe was created that you feel the township has, characterized as something else? Is that where is that come from? Are you hearing feedback from farmers that they're trying to create an entrance to a field and townships demanding a site alt permit and a fill permit? Is that, I'm not sure, you just mentioned it in your presentation.
The only way I believe the only way we mentioned in here, but a new laneway is that should still go through the process.
It should go through the process?
I believe that's through my notes, the new laneway, yes, there should be a process for that. Maintenance, regular maintenance of your laneway. You should just be able to do that. And if you needed, an inch of gravel to put onto that, such as we have a kilometer long laneway in our farm. I don't know how many loads, but that would be above the 2 loads that you'd be exempt from in the bylaw.
So you did mention washout, being complaint driven. If you have if I owned a farm and I had a washout and I had the truck coming to pick up the chickens, I'm gonna fix it. And if you're just fixing the washout, what's the likelihood of the neighbor complaining about you fixing the washout? I would think pretty small, right? And 2 loads of gravel, whether it's from a pit or maybe it's from your neighbors, but 2 loads is, I worked in yards when I was driving a dump truck, 40 yards. It's a lot. So if you have a washout that requires more than 40 yards, then yeah, you might need to consult the township, but I don't feel that, I think we have amazing staff here. If there's a washout and you fix your washout and the township received the complaint on Saturday, come investigate Monday, I would hope, and I'm pretty confident they would recognize that, oh yeah, there's the barn full of chickens. There's the washout, putting it back to the way it was for the most part. If you then go and strip every hill all the way back to the chicken barn and change the grade and dig another hole, that's not maintenance of your laneway, right? So this is the things we're encountering in our municipality is that they're trying to paint it as a normal farm practice just to circumvent a system. And we need a partner there that recognize that we're here to protect farmland. We're here to protect neighbors, site alt, right? So I liked Councillor's suggestion that if you're hearing feedback, because if we have a bylaw complaint and we have photos and documentation and stuff, the staff deal with it. Privacy law says we can't share it, we can't show it, and rightfully so. But if you have members that have concerns about how our bylaw is being implemented, I would love for you to go to that member and have them sit here, provide the photos of their project, provide it to this council, so then they can say, we feel this is normal farm practice, look how minimal this is. I hate to do this to you, staff, but I mean, staff are interpreting this wrong, and let us judge that. That's what we need. We need those examples because we can't do that. We can't say to the court of public opinion, here's what we're seeing in the township and show everybody. But you can, they can. So if we're so bad, and this is so wrong, and it's not in the spirit of protecting farmland from all the pressures of the GTA, have them come and we'll have that conversation. And we'll see the photos and we'll see. And if you're gonna put your weight behind that this is normal farm practice, I'd love to have those conversations. Because maybe I'm ignorant, naive, I don't know, but you know, the things I'm seeing, they weren't going through the process 100%, but I could be wrong. So let's see it. So, because it is, we're under so much pressure from Phil and Cycle. So, and you know this, right? Like, it's incredible. And once it's on the ground, you're paying. Get rid of it. Because the value of the property will not cover the cost of the remediation. And the people can just walk away. And then we own it as a corporation, and then we have to pay to get it. Because once we know about it, we have to deal with it. So this needs to be in place to help prevent that. We also want to support farmers. Like I said, if your land is up and down and you want to increase productivity and make sure you can get a bigger combine in there, I think it's all good. But just don't start bringing in Phil without asking. So anyway, and the last thing I want to ask you about. Oh, I'll back up. The committee, I feel like you already are an advisory committee. We've had discussions in the last budget cycle about seniors committee, looking at you. Our support staff for our committees is maxed out. They're already overworked. At this point, it would require additional like FT full-time employee FTEs, which has a budget impact. We're going to do the public meeting. So for this year, likely not going to happen, but if we're going to add more committees, it's going to add staff. And that's a very real conversation. I feel that in your capacity, you already comment, you're very well engaged, Barclay and Jan, right? Jan. I view you as a voice. Even at the county committee level, we've had discussions, and generally, well, I've asked, have you engaged WFA? Have you talked to the OFA? We respect you and we want to hear your feedback. Now, are you, you know, just maybe like a mayor? I mean, like, you need help, maybe you need support because you got bigger like maybe bylaw policies and things that you need to focus on, and maybe WFA doesn't have the staff to build a committee. I don't know, but we also don't have that. So right now, just I want you to know that we appreciate your input and respect it as the experts or as the representation of the farmers. Now, lastly, I want to ask you, have you received direction from your board to represent the WFA at normal farm practice as carte blanche? So you've attended them. Is that direction from your board to go there as your official capacity to these normal farm board practices, or what's the process for you to do that? Or as like, I know as mayor, I walk to the beat of the council's drum. They say generally where you can go, what your position should be, but can you just on your own merit just attend farm practice boards, represent farmers, or not? Like, how does that process work for you?
Well, if I was to present, yes, I would ask. The only time I have been part of it is through a introductory hearing, and that was for educational purposes.
So when you attend these meetings and you get official status, do you inform the board that you're there for educational purposes? Or because the perception of the president of WFA walking in may be that you're supporting one side or the other. And I feel that may need direction from your board, because that may be very influential.
And I did talk to the board about it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so
But to be clear, when Barclay has been to the Norm Farmer or to the board or any other farm member that's going on their own behalf, they're there just watching, they're just observing, they're not representing WFA. If the perception is they're representing WFA, then there's another process for us to be recognized, but we've never gone to the practice board representing WFA. And I think you had said you had some questions for us, and what you spoke to us about was very valid, but we haven't had an opportunity to actually be asked a question to be able to respond, mainly around the normal practice board. Around discussions we've had around our table have been, what is a qualified person? And in the realm of bylaw, and within the realm of bylaw, that could be construed, and through our policy advisor work we've done with OFA to review this bylaw, we're only bringing forward things that could be considered a risk to our members. So what is a qualified person? Does that mean every conflict goes to the board. And that was one discussion that you clearly said is not going to be the case, and that's not the intent, but that's not clear to us. So what is a qualified person within the bylaw?
I believe it's defined through the ORIC, but yeah, that's,
So through you, Mr. Chair, it's defined through section 5 and 6 of Ontario Regulation 15304. So it is quite specific about who could qualify to act on behalf as a QP, whether it be for the township as we do our review or for the applicant.
and just to pause it, I don't believe they require a QP for farm practice support. You can go represent yourself. I've read some of them, but for the, you want a QP for the fill bylaw process because they're gonna sign off on what they're saying is lack of a better term, legit, right? So then that's how we have confidence that, okay, if they're saying this is table 1 soil, anyways, it's a bigger process. So it is defined. It's not something we created. Now that's, I don't know if that's something we need to do a little more. I don't know how we do more education. We point to the OREG, but do you have suggestions on how to clarify that for people?
Well, that was where the discussion at WFA came around the Ag Advisory Committee, and whether it's an official committee or whether it's staff reach out to WFA from that on the ground kind of overarching county perspective, which is you've done, which is quite valuable. We don't want to be in an adversarial role, and that's why we're here at this table. We see things coming forward in conflict, and you've asked for specific examples. We're not here to speak to specific examples. We're here to speak overall of the bylaw itself. And with our work that we've done with OFA, they have flagged some of the areas which were the reason for the presentation that could be viewed as a risk for members. So we don't want to get into the weeds around it. We want to stay in developing the bylaw to be able to mitigate risk.
I appreciate that. However, when your president states normal or normal lane, I forget your original
Maintenance.
lane maintenance, things of this nature. And in the community, that's what's being said is this bylaw is prohibiting lane maintenance, and then I feel that if that's what you're hearing, because we can't, we can't, then bring it and show it. I know getting into the details, but Russell's a farmer. I am not a farmer. I feel there would be value in bringing these photos and saying, this is what we generally consider a normal lane creation to a field. And then this one was, get one of these people that's had enforcement to share it. And share it. I don't see the consequence of it. If it's an education component for us and staff as non-farmers to know what is normal practice, or at least consider from your perspective, we may have, reports to say different, but at least we can start to get that narrowed down. Right?
Yeah.
Whereas the accusations in the community that we're being punitive and this is maintenance and minor maintenance and things of that nature, I find that difficult because it's not what we're experiencing. And I'd like to get somewhere, but the normal farm practice waiver, that's why it's never been applied for. Because they've all been caught by a complaint. So nobody's been proactive, right? So to criticize, I just find that tough to get behind.
But we are representing producers that are bona fide farm businesses. So reading through some of the comments in the online questionnaire and some of the negative comments, those people clearly are not farming their land. So I think we have to find that middle ground where people that are actually farming their land and working their land can do routine practices without having a concern that their neighbor might be calling and complaining about the practice when it's considered in their mind and they've researched and know that it's routine.
It's biased. So if they're gonna do something, they do the research. They can, is it an email or how they apply for a normal farm practice waiver, contact the township. And they submit what they want to do, and the township says, yes. And then when the neighbor calls, there's a waiver, it's not permanent, where the goal is it is in place.
Yeah.
And then the township can say, they would likely visit. I'm just guessing, but if you get, because we've had people with permits and people complain when they just do a spot check, that's just part of managing it, right? It doesn't mean you're gonna get in trouble. So if the neighbor calls, it's just bylaw drives out. Yeah, you're doing what you said. Nice day.
Yeah.
Carry on.
That's very fair, and
Right.
there's education for sure around current farm business owners, and I had similar conversations because we've had issues in Center Wellington around other issues, and it's like wanting from a farmer perspective, being viewed as, I want to come to the township and have those conversations, and the municipality is business friendly.
Mhm.
So, to have those conversations and those perceptions so that you can start those conversations and people can feel comfortable that it's a partnership that we all want to, in the end, have the same outcome. I think that's the piece that we want to see, and that's the piece that, if we're clear about any concerns that we had, from our OFA staff person when we did some review of, and other reviews that we've done with what, site alteration bylaws are and fill bylaws are in other parts of the province. We would just want an end product that can be used by both sides.
And unfortunately, you won't want to hear this, but we have that right now. It's just the lack of utilization from the other side. And we have this with the aggregate industry. I know I'm getting this way off schedule, but whatever. We're experiencing things in the aggregate industry that, only one or two other members are experiencing. And it's very problematic.
Mhm.
Similar to the farming community with the fill importation, the pressures from the urban centers. Unfortunately for Pussons, we're in the middle of, major urban centers, and we're just experiencing these differences. So we may be at the forefront of this. But the bylaw has things built in that you can do your maintenance. But it's the people that are getting caught doing more than just that,
Mhm.
and then they don't like it. So back to representing at the normal farm board practice. I think it's very important that your president understands when he walks in that door and what do they give you if you walk in and represent official status? Is that in your mind, Jan, if you walk in a normal farm practice hearing and that board gives you official status, are you there as education component, or are you there now representing somebody or party to this hearing?
It would be no different than me coming and sitting in the gallery. I'm not here as official status. I'm here to listen and to learn, and that was it. The hearing that you went to, that was all that happened. There wasn't a official recognition that he was there representing WFA,
I would disagree.
really,
Yeah.
based on.
I'll just leave it there. We can agree to disagree, but
Okay.
just be very cognizant of, as, and I have to do it as well. I can't just march off and walk into some hearing and be like, what's lunch? And just even the optics of it. So,
Okay.
to
that's
be
fair.
recognized officially at a hearing, I feel, and I'd like your board to discuss it, to have some sort of process, or at least have the president acknowledge that he needs that direction from the board to do that, is my thing. So I'm getting a dry throat from talking so much. In the beginning of our meeting, we add the questions and answers from council that, the council asked staff in relation to the agenda, and, there was some questions around the compost. And remind me, I believe staff's going to look at that because I don't understand it entirely, but I feel staff's gonna take a look at that because there may be some room for improvement in that. Again, the township is not, in my mind, we shouldn't be worried as much about spreading manure from your cow barn on the field kind of thing. So I don't know if and this happens, when you build a bylaw this large, there may be a couple things that sneak through. So I feel like you're gonna take a look at the compost component. Oh, I know, I keep going. High costs associated with the application process. Do you want to speak to some of our neighbors, Uxbridge costs? So now we're switching to, fill importation, things of that nature, but speak to some of those higher costs in our neighbors and where we landed and how we feel it's,
So through Mr. Chair, within the presentation document, and we went through this in December, so we didn't go through it. We spent time today going through the presentation again. But again, referencing back to that presentation, when township staff make a recommendation to set fees for bylaws or for any of our user fees and charges, things like that, there is a very comprehensive analysis done where we look at comparable fees in other municipalities. And then we also look at what our actual costs are. So we need to make sure that we're balancing fees so that we're just in a cost recovery position. And so when we did a brief analysis in the presentation, just showing where we are, and we're significantly lower with our fees than a lot of the comparable municipalities, particularly with the cost per cubic meter. I believe we're at 24 cents per cubic meter, and that was derived from the aggregate industry and what Torque charges per truck or per cubic meter, pardon me, and we essentially doubled that truck in and truck out. So that was the purpose of the 24 cents. In comparison, Uxbridge charges $5 per cubic meter. So they're very much saying not open for business. Don't bring your fill here. We don't want it. And that's their prerogative. The township took a very different approach. We aligned ourselves with the provincial excess soil regime. So we're saying this is, you know, what the province has said is what we need to be doing provincially for excess soil management. And so the township sort of aligned our bylaw with that. And so setting fees that are truly cost recoverable for us and making sure that I believe the president made note of this. We don't want to be so prohibitive that people just go ahead and do it illegally, right? It's so prohibitive that, you know what, we're gonna take our chances and see if we get caught. We want a process, which is why we have the staggered permit types, so that it's sort of that graduating scale of the larger, more complex projects. They require a little bit more to make sure that we are achieving compliance, because it's really what we want. We know that fill is important. There's a lot of good uses for fill. And so we want to make sure folks are able to get a permit, and our process so far over the last year, we've been working through it, and we will be continuing to do some education and monitoring the administration of the bylaw to make sure that we're achieving that compliance piece.
And I'll add to that. So we've had 20 instances where I believe we have fill importation, 3 received permits. So that means 17 instances of they got caught. So not awesome. High cost. It could be because, you know, we'll say a farmer, let's go back to the site all, makes a big laneway and neighbor calls and you get a complaint. Staff will come out, and we heard earlier that they will look at the project and they will make a determination. The mayor does not tell staff how to make determinations. That's like a big no-no. I think it's even the mayor's done if you're a staff, it's big trouble. Staff make a determination. That's where the QP comes in. That's where costs are going to be high, because now you're going to have to hire the tree guy, salamander guy, this girl guy, person, whatever. You're gonna get specialists. And the costs are going to be high, because we're going to, we and staff are going to rely on experts, not just, well, I say there weren't trees there, and I say that, you know, whatever. No, this is how we operate. We need experts. So you want to keep your costs down, tell your members to come in and ask for a normal farm practice waiver. Then they can weigh themselves whether they want to go forward with this project. It might not be financially viable. Maybe we can have that conversation about, well, this is normal farm practice, save everybody a ton of money. You know, so that's, I think, the messaging going back is the costs come in when you're in enforcement from bylaw, and that can be significantly reduced with that process that's embedded in the bylaw. Because
Makes sense.
yeah.
Yep.
And it's an education component. So again, thank you for your presentation. Thank you for your time. Sorry kept you so long. We have recommendations.
It's received from-
I can move for that, please. Councilor Lewis, Councilor Hurst, all in favor? That's carried.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys. Have a good day. What do we want to do now?
Look at our dedication, being a puppet.
We're not even falling down, but here I see. Probably trying to get the delegations and to break, or what's the? Everybody?
Sure.
I'm just waiting for more staff, and we're gonna start. Hey, Laura. Welcome, nice to see you again.
Thank you. I was gonna start, oh, do we have handouts for everybody? Oh, great, okay. Gonna start with good morning, but it's now good afternoon.
That's my fault.
So as a reminder, my name is Kelly Wallace. I'm here today with 4 out of my 5 children. I've got Christina, Alicia, and Kathleen, and this is Dana Kofelt, and Dana and I will address you today. Thank you for allowing us to delegate this a second time and giving us the opportunity to better understand the process. We are here today to object to the heritage designation for our 100-acre property at 6714 Concession 1. My response today is going to primarily be in response to the staff report ADM 2025-002. And I would like to reiterate that this property holds immense personal significance to my family. It's a memorial site, a family retreat, a future residence for adult grandchildren, and a cherished hobby farm. We have no intention of selling the property or demolishing the house. Today we'll demonstrate that the historical references used to support the designation are inaccurate and ambiguous, that this property fails to meet the designation criteria, that the designation presents privacy and security risk, and it imposes unreasonable financial burdens. The historical context and ownership timeline. The staff states that the property is historically associated with the Highland Scots immigration to the area. While the Scots immigrated to the area, they were not the first settlers or the first owners of the land. Per the Puss Lynch historical website, the first property settlers here was Mr. Page from Quebec. It would appear that he purchased the land in the 1840s. Eventually, he had a wooden hotel and tavern on the property. Next, Mr. Blue took over and ran the hotel and tavern. The Historical Society notes that these were west of the current stone building during Mr. Blue's residence. In early 1860, it appears that Mr. Oakham purchased the property. According to the Historical Society, there's a statement that says Mr. Ferguson opened the post office in 1865. Another section says that he owned the property in 1875 and ran the store and post office then. Mr. Ferguson died in 1891, so it would appear that there was a potential 26-year history of business for him at this location. To fill in the ownership gaps after Ferguson died, I called Monroe Ferguson, Betty Ferguson's son, who is the person we bought the property from. And just for clarity, Betty Ferguson and Monroe Ferguson have no relationship to Donald Ferguson, who is referenced throughout the staff report. It's just simply a coincidence of last names. It's not clear who owned it for the next 28 years from 1891 to 1919, but according to Monroe, from 1919 to 1970, the property was abandoned and the house was vacant for over 50 years. The Historical Society notes that Barbers purchased it in 1950. Monroe told me that the Barbers had bought it with the intentions to renovate it, but never did, and they never moved in. Betty Ferguson bought it in 1970 in a completely dilapidated state. There were no doors, windows, electricity, or plumbing. Monroe was a child and said it took about a year for his mom to add these things. Once electricity, plumbing, doors, and windows were on the property, they moved in. The house was still in very rough shape, but they had heat and water. Betty was very eccentric, and the subfloor that she covered up with Mennonite rugs is still bare to this day. In the 1990s, Betty added on the back bedroom and bathroom and the Victorian covered indoor pool. Betty spent 50 years living there in her award-winning gardens until she couldn't any longer. I'm told she had great parties with camping tents pitched in the yard, and sometimes in the summer there were no closed parties too. The house never got the attention she had intended, and the house has been neglected for the better part of 106 years. There is a failure to meet the designated criteria. The township was authorized to designate a property to be of cultural heritage and value value or interest if the property meets the prescribed 3-point criteria. First point, design value. Stating that the design of the property is a complex of early commercial and domestic architecture is a far reach, when in fact, the property is an eclectic hodgepodge of various inconsistent stonework or mismatched patches with multiple more recent modern additions, each set to different time periods and with limited original structure. An early picture of this house appears to have a very large opening rather than a double door entrance with a transom, as noted in the staff report. At some point, that may have been filled in with stone, hence the mismatch or conglomeration of stonework. Per Monroe, the 12.8 mullion panes and the 6.6 mullion windows and the doors were installed by his mother and are not original. Staff has now agreed to this point. I also confirmed with Monroe that the post office and store were in the original structure on the ground floor to the east, and therefore the single-story stone extension that connected the original structure in the farmhouse was simply living space for the family and not the post office, as stated in the staff report. In Schedule B of the report, staff have suggested that fieldstone exterior walls, sills, and lintels be protected. The sills are not fieldstone. They are rotting wood and must be replaced sooner rather than later. There is no way to protect them as they are too far gone. Point 2, contextual value. I don't believe that it's fair to label this the Donald Ferguson property when it was owned and built by multiple Canadians prior to him and multiple people after him for significantly longer periods. Donald Ferguson sounds like an interesting and intelligent man, but most likely only lived on this property for 26 years. He did donate some of the land to the Killian Cemetery, and that is well noted in the history books and on the front gates of the cemetery. Staff further states that the Ferguson store and post office are a landmark on the streetscape of properties from the mid to late 19th century. I believe the house existed before Ferguson owned it, and there is no streetscape. This house sits behind a 6-foot fence with lots of trees and brush and never visible in the spring, summer, or fall. It's slightly visible in the winter when the leaves are off the tree. And it's funny, even in the winter when the building is so hidden even in the winter, that the staff passed it by on the way in for our site meeting that we had just 2 weeks ago. Point 3, historical value. There's not much to find on the Historical Society website about this property or Donald Ferguson. When you read the staff report on this property and compare it to the many other worthwhile properties that staff has created reports on, you will see quite a large disparity between this report and other reports. I believe the cemetery is more important to Donald Ferguson's contribution and legacy, and that is duly noted and documented. While there's clearly some history at this property, it failed to meet at least 2 of the 3 pointed prescribed criteria. The contextual and design value is nil, and the historical knowledge is weak and vague.
Privacy. Having our address publicly listed on heritage websites and associated materials is a significant invasion of privacy for both homeowners and tenants. Without our consent, this address has been listed and published online and in print. Publicizing the address of a private residence creates unnecessary exposure for those who live there, including potential trespassing and unwanted attention. This exposure compromises our ability to maintain the privacy and security of our family and occupants. Financial burdens. The staff report notes under financial implications, none. We're very confused by that because there will be many financial implications. So should this house be considered heritage or historical? Number 1, the township has already acknowledged these excess burdens of maintenance and repairs via the tax breaks in the 2019 Community Improvement Plan for homeowners that choose designation. We are not choosing this designation. Number 2, there will be an immediate increase in our insurance. According to our provider, the annual premium from our property will increase from $1,834 to $9,526, a staggering increase of $7,691 per year. This is an unjustifiable financial burden. Despite the township being able to provide some tax relief, it is insufficient to offset these expenses. Future development. The majority of this property is zoned natural environment. That has an environmental protection overlay, is regulated by the GRCA, and sits in a floodplain. There is no feasible spot on the property for any further construction. To our understanding, we cannot build any new structures on the property. The current foundation of this house is grandfathered in a specific location, so our only option for a future home is to remodel. We are committed to honoring as much of the original stone structure as reasonably possible.
If the designation is based on Donald Ferguson having a long history with the property, then that is imbalance to the history of the parcel in the house. Furthermore, arguing over a building that isn't at risk of demolition wastes taxpayer money and adds undue complexity and stress to property ownership. Forcing this designation feels more like a punishment than an act of preservation. While the property has some historical context due to its age, the minimal history appears incomplete. It does not meet the prescribed criteria for designation, and the burdensome financial, administrative, and privacy implications of the designation far outweigh any public benefit, particularly as it is inaccessible to the community and public. I do understand the township's goals, and the question I ask is if exceptions cannot be made, then what's the purpose of this delegation? We respectfully urge the council to remove 6714 concession 1 from the list of properties proposed for the designation. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you for your presentation. Just for clarification, when you see in a report, financial implications, none, that refers to us. Because the staff are telling the council that if they make a decision, it won't impact the budget. So if it were to say, 30, again, I'm sure you get it, 30,000. Well, that might not be budgeted for that particular year, and they need to know that's gonna have an impact and the levy will have to go up. So that's all that's saying is it's not a monetary impact to us.
Wouldn't
in
there,
that particular time. It's
wouldn't
not.
there still be an impact though, if there's tax relief breaks? Because you're not getting the tax money that you would have been getting?
Fair, but that is dealt with at budget time. Our treasurer brings a report that, and forgive me, I don't remember the title of it, but there's other times where taxes are written off and they have a separate report. So that would be captured at the end of the year saying, okay, well, we expected to collect, I'll make up a number, $4 million in taxes. We're at X because of what these are the reasons. And yes, that does affect us. If we have a surplus, then our surplus would then offset that. But for that immediate moment, you're not making a decision that's going to impact budget. So, but you're right, there is almost a side effect cause as well, but.
Well, in addition, also, you guys have said that there's going to be some kind of financial support for grants. Who funds that?
We approved the budget, I believe it's 10,000.
But is that funded from the township money? So that would be a cost to you also, if we were to take advantage of that.
Depends how it's built, but we put in $10,000 and that's levy money and that stays in there now. And when you get into, so that 10,000 goes in once, so that's a levy increase in say year 2020, then it's there forever. Until we decide to take it out. But if we say build a program similar to our gravel roads, where we're adding gravel roads improvements or where we're adding money levy every year, then yes, every year your taxes go up for that. I don't believe that's the case for the heritage one. We put a contribution to it. We're gonna hear reports back. If it's not meeting, funding isn't meeting the needs of the program, then in the future we can add to it. But so it all depends on. Okay. I just want to clarify that for you. Councilor Hurst.
Yeah, thanks, folks. I appreciate actually just the fact you put this briefing note together. Yeah, a couple things. So I think the first one, the fact that you had staff come into your property, I think it's very much appreciated from my perspective. I think that shows a willingness to engage in a dialogue. Very clear where you stand on this. I don't think that's any great surprise, but I think just being open to having them come out, showing them the facility, I think, well positioned. You do make a couple points in the designation criteria, and I think when I was going through my thoughts prior to the meeting today, the three that came to mind would be specifically the Ferguson House, original doors and windows. Based on what I'm hearing in the report, those no longer exist. Fieldstone exterior walls, sills and intels, maybe to a degree.
There's no sills.
Yeah. So that one was kind of gray from my standpoint, and the third one being the height, scale, and massing of a 1/2 story in general structure, maybe to a degree. So I think that was one where I was kind of questioning, like, if this is what's in the designation criteria, and maybe this doesn't exist, but that gives me cause for concern. A couple other ones that just came to mind, and bear with me on, the development pieces, I think that might be and I don't want to get into this today, but like a misunderstanding around what a heritage designation does to the property and restrictions on future developments. There's processes. It doesn't mean you can't do anything. It just means there's a review process. The one that caught me was the insurance, and maybe I'm just reading it wrong, but I'm just looking at the premium. I don't want to get into the difference, but in the current policy, you've got dwelling insurance at 250,000. And then in the new policy, the dwelling insurance goes to 1.8 million.
That's what the cooperator said would have to happen to insure it as a heritage property.
So
So
they're valuing that.
it's an apples, even though the dollar amounts, I agree, they're ridiculous. But it's an apples to apples comparison with that designation.
That seems peculiar. I won't go down that path, but,
We have a 30-year relationship with cooperators and have lots of policies, so this is
yeah,
what my trusted insurance person told me.
that's fair, and it's not my place to get into insurance back and forth, it just, I'm like. Okay. I would say. Yeah, I think those are most of my comments. I think mainly just some concerns around what we were looking to designate as heritage attributes, and do they actually currently exist? That's probably where I'm concerned with right now. I'll leave it as mine.
And I know staff came out and looked at everything. I would, if you guys are still considering this, I would ask you guys to come out and take a look at the house, because the house is such a hodgepodge of, it's field stone here, and then above it and over here is pointed stone, and then it goes back and there's bad patchworks. Unfortunately, before our stewardship, it was abandoned for 50 years and not maintained during Betty Ferguson's lifetime. So I want to keep the stone walls. I want to incorporate them into another, better R-rated house, our valued house. But I don't know at what extent, the stone walls can be salvaged.
That's fair. Okay, thanks. Councilor Gordon?
Thanks for being here today. Thanks very much for this. This is helpful. I just wanted to say that I appreciate that you began your presentation by saying that this is a property that has significance to your family, and that you have no intention of selling it or demolishing it. For me anyway, that carries significant weight. So that was very helpful to hear. Thank you. I just wanted to, maybe more curious than anything, since you were here to delegate in December, you've had now a site visit with staff. And I'm just wondering how you found that experience. Was that exercise beneficial for you? And this is maybe understanding sort of what your experience has been, so that we can maybe also understand and look at others who may be going through the same thing.
Yeah, staff's been professional and kind and lovely through the whole experience. Having them out was a perfectly fine experience. I think it was helpful for them to see, they could tell instantly that the windows and doors weren't original. So I think that was valid. They got a firsthand look at the patchwork of stone, and I'm sure it was very helpful for them to come out and see it. It didn't change their opinion. I know they're still recommending that this be designated. And that's disappointing after they saw it firsthand. That's why I would invite you guys to come out and take a look at it.
Well, in any case, to Councillor Hurst's point, I appreciate that you were willing to allow that to take.
Oh, we were never not willing to allow it. It's, as you guys know, I've been in a grieving state, and I just wasn't engaged in this process and came to it late to the show. So December 18th was helpful to kind of get a better handle on how this process works. And so hopefully we've come a bit better prepared this time.
Thank you.
Councilor Spose.
Yes, thank you for coming in and giving us your second thorough presentation. Just a quick question with respect to the comment you made to Councilor Goyda on the stone walls. You mentioned that you don't know if it could be saved. Can you just elaborate a bit on that?
I think that, when I do engage with a, contractor, they'll come out and take a look and tell me what they think is still sound and safe to remain and what's gonna have to be repatched. There's some real questionable patches that have happened and I'm not talking about this, I'm talking about, an 8x10 area, of like a big patch and where it probably was pointed stone and it's now random field stones with a very sloppy cement between it. So some of that stuff's just gonna have to come down again. And if they can salvage it and put it back up, great. If not, we figure out how we incorporate, some of the neat architectural history of the house in with a more modern functioning house.
Not modernly designed, though, just for clarification.
I'm sure Council Goyda's comment that it's very comforting here that you want to stay there, you want to preserve the house, and you have no intentions of doing any harm to it.
Yes,
So-
and to emphasize that, I mean, my husband's memorial site is there, and that's incredibly important to us. The house will not be sold in my lifetime, and I don't think that my children will sell it after because it's become a very recreational meeting spot for us. We go and have barbecues and we toboggan and we hang out there.
And just a question to you, Mr. Mayor, would you be willing to bring up the report deal with right after this presentation, so these people.
I know it after the other one. Isn't there two properties? Or
No,
just one? Oh, okay, sure.
Yeah, the other one's to do with the
Oh, no, oh, right,
Kennels.
right, sorry, my mistake, I thought it were two. Yep, no, it's fine.
No, I'm of the firm opinion that it should be voluntary as long as there's assurances that the house will not be demolished. I will support anybody who comes forward and says, I do not want my place designated and intend to preserve it, I'll keep it.
Thank you.
Councilor Goyda? Haley Keepers. What grade I can call you good? Sorry, that's not an insult. I mean, it's just-
Just touching on Councilor Sepulos's last comment there. Are there any assurances that a house won't be demolished that we can put in place on a property or on, how do we get assurance that something isn't going to be demolished? Other than designating the property?
Asking me?
No.
So through you, Mr. Chair, council likely already knows the answer to this. It used to be listed status on the register with the changes that the province made. It really is designation. So there's nothing you can register on title. There's no other mechanism, no other legal mechanism that you can put in place to prevent demolition. It is when a property owner submits an application for demolition, at that point in time, it's too late. You cannot retroactively designate a property.
I guess I have a question. Thanks for coming today. It's great to have this dialogue back and forth. If you were to look at the property, at the house in particular, are there any physical attributes that you think are worth preserving and have value?
Yes, the stone facade.
Stone facade. So if the bylaw just said physical attributes, stone facade, would that satisfy your?
The challenge with that is that, as I expressed, there's huge patches. And I can't preserve all of that. It's going to have to be taken down. It's gonna have to be reappointed. I don't know everything that's involved with it.
We haven't had it evaluated yet.
Yeah, we've
So
not had the
question for
contract.
staff Is taking a stone facade down and putting it back up in a proper pointed thing, still within preserving the physical attribute of the property.
So through Mr. Chair, depending on the attributes that are listed in the bylaw, whatever those attributes end up being, an example is a stone. It still doesn't necessarily preclude somebody from making changes. What it does is it says, this is a listed attribute that we've identified. Come get your permit. You can come to council. Oftentimes what we see is changes can be made, and oftentimes council might approve a permit with conditions. So we want to see that you're using a restoration specialist that knows how to do that. We might want to see a particular type of material used that's representative of what originally was there. So it really does fall back on the council taking advice from their committee as to, you know, I think one of the myths that we tried to debunk through this process was heritage permits doesn't necessarily mean no. It just means how can we get there by maintaining the things that we want to try to protect. And that can be done through the permit process. And ultimately, this council has the authority to say yes with conditions. Like that's their role through this process. So it's not to mean that it can't be done. It's just how can it be done?
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. I really appreciate the work you've put into the historical kind of context of it. And I think we can recognize that the bylaws that are being created are being created to the best of the ability of the people doing the work. And they're not out trying to do every little detail, but now that you've found some of those details, we can start to fill in the blanks and make the bylaw more accurate. So I think that's part of it. And I know you're saying you relate to the process, but I feel like the process is sort of just starting. So we've already had, you know, one proposal, one bylaw where you folks were saying, wait a minute, like there's still some work to do with this. Staff has come out, okay, we've got a second draft of it, but maybe there's more work to be done. So again, to staff, what is our timeline? What timelines are we working within to make a decision on whether we designate this property or not?
Through you, Mr. Chair. The notice of intention to designate went out on October 17th. So the last day we have to pass the designation bylaw within these timelines is February 14th. That being said, we don't have a council meeting between now and February 14th so this is the last formal council meeting there is to make a decision. It can always be withdrawn and we can restate our notice of intention to designate like we've done in the past. But under these timelines, the 120 days is up as of February 14th.
Okay. And maybe I'll just give you a little context. My husband works with heritage homes every day. That's what he does. And a lot of it is figuring out how can we maintain, you know, the attributes that are really important to the homeowner, that are important to the township, and makes it work. You know, I had him actually look at the bylaw and he said, there's a lot of flexibility built into what those physical attributes are. And it sounds like you have some great ideas about what you want to do with the house, bringing it modern, and all of that is doable. It just depends on, who we're engaging and whether we have the proper permit in place. So just from me, I don't feel like this would restrict the vision that you have for this property, because it sounds like it's, you know, really, really important, and you're going to put a lot of creativity and effort into it. And I think it's just gives you something to work within. So just let me know where I'm coming from.
Well, I appreciate that. And I guess at some point, I don't know if there's a relationship of trust, you know, between what I'm representing and what you guys are looking at deciding on. That, you know, do you trust me? Do you trust us as 6 families who are Puslinch residents and, you know, want to preserve this property to do, you know, what we say?
I think that's a tough statement to say to council, because if we designate them, is that implying that we don't trust you? And that's not the case.
Well,
So I just have that trouble. We have a role, we have a committee that suggests properties. And I'm very much so agree with their suggestion that should be designated. I think there's some misunderstanding also around the GRCA protections. And it may be on my end, but GRCA, if you were to knock that house down, you can rebuild in that footprint, even though it's in the floodplain. You can't go outside of that. So we've heard it from other delegations that, oh, the GRCA provides protections. No, they don't. You can still knock it down and build in that footprint, even if it's in that same footprint. But if you wanted to, say, put a 10,000 square foot addition on, they likely wouldn't permit that because it's not in the original footprint. So we've heard that before, that the GRCA has the protection, you don't need the heritage, so that's not the case. Again, back to the committee, I support them. I think that these are important designations. However, I am not in favor of designating this property, and strictly because council's decision of a previous objection, we expended significant staff time, significant resources, multiple delegations. We get to the end and we don't have a willing participant, and they said, no, we're not doing it. So if we don't have a willing participant, I'm pretty certain you're not going to change your mind. I cannot change your mind. I don't agree with your logic, which is fine. We can agree to disagree. But we, as you heard earlier, the challenges we have in this township around fill, aggregate, to have staff work through this process for, well, now we're at a closer timeline, and then to just say, no, we're not going to do it, just do it now. So that's the precedent we set last. That's, you know what, I'm gonna give you a vote. I'm gonna give you a vote here. I would ask you to ask the counselors, the previous ones objected, why can't I be treated the same? Because that's how we operate. So once we set a precedent that we don't have a willing host, we're not gonna designate it, that should be carte blanche for everybody. And then when we put the list together and we get people that say no, save the staff resources and just remove them. That's what we've set ourselves up for. That's very much where I agree with them, but, so I don't agree with it. I think it should be designated, but I just know how busy they are, and I just can't have them going to your property, working through, the exceptions. Already, the windows, the doors, I'm simplifying the terminology. I was glad to hear that, it was a positive experience, but they've made those exceptions for you, and there could be more. Really, it's the stone walls, but you're not a willing host. I don't feel you're gonna change, so let the staff focus on other ones. That's kind of where I'm at, so. I think there isn't any need for any more comment. We'll just receive it. We'll go over the report as council supposed. Do we need a recommendation to?
What I'll do is I'll add it to the delegation, if that's all right with council, just to advance the report following the delegation, and the motion I have is to receive the delegation for information.
Sure, can I move for that, please? Councilor White, Councilor Spillis, all in favor? Thank you. Thank you for taking your time today.
Thank you very much.
Ask you to return to the gallery, and we have the item number for that. Please. 932. 932. Councilor Spillis.
Thank you for the water.
You're welcome. I apologize.
I can go.
Yes.
I never know. Through you, Mr. Chair, the purpose of this report is for council to consider the objection received from council's notice of intention to designate on 6714 concession 1. And staff are seeking council's direction with respect to proceeding with this process.
Thank you. Councilor Hurst?
Yeah, I think based on the discussion, and it,
I'm not in favor of designation.
I'm okay with Roger's decision to designate. I'd like to comment, Mr. Mayor, on your statement before. As far as I'm concerned, if there's a person who objects at the same time as intending to preserve the home, I will support withdrawing it. But if there's a person who objects and intends to demolish, I will not support that person.
I'm choosing option 1, recommending to designate.
Okay, so be the mover. So it sounds like we have be the mover to recommend not designating, please. Councilor Spillis, Councilor Hurst. All in favor? Yeah, 4. Carried.
Just can you just repeat those mover and seconder for me?
Councilor Hurst and who is it? Councilor Spillis. All right. Next, we have the delegation No.
No.
Sure, oh, sorry. Sorry.
You want
me to
Sorry,
move out?
I went too fast. We have a little bit more than. Yes, sorry. No, it's my fault. My fault. Sorry, yes, there's probably the balance of the properties and.
Rest of the 2024 properties.
Yes.
Through Mr. Chair, just before we continue, I know Councillor Goida has a conflict for one, so we should split them into two, and I
Yeah.
just, if I could just get the address.
Or
again.
is that on Tuesday? Watson.
May I have a question?
Sure.
This is a separate report, 9.3.1.
Well, so we can do it later,
We can do it later.
right? Do the delegation. But they're all in there. No, the rest of them are embodied now.
It is a separate report.
Separate
It is
report?
separate. Can
Okay.
can you wait?
Sorry.
I can come back.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah,
I
we'll do
can
this
back.
delegation, then we'll break, and then we'll go back to
Sorry.
normal order.
Oh,
This is
that was my-
well being right. All right, come on back down.
Okay,
Sorry.
it's not a long walk.
All right.
Chairs.
You get the right item number, there we go. Was 7.2.1 for raise information, and you may start.
Out of the chair.
Jennifer,
Are we ready?
yes, we are.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jennifer Beeler, and I currently reside in the village of Arkell. Mayor Seeley and Puslinch Council members. The intent of my delegation today is to engage in a conversation that leads to an amendment of the Puslinch Kennel and Dog Licensing Bylaw 024-2021 to allow for in-home dog care at the council's discretion, as has been done by neighboring townships of Mapleton, Minto, and Wellington North. Let me start by commending council. As a female small business entrepreneur, I am delighted to see on Puslinch's Township's website statements of support like, our township offers businesses the perfect community to grow and strengthen their operations, and with the assistance of the County of Wellington, our vision is to provide assistance to local companies for developing their businesses. I can't begin to express how encouraging this kind of support is to someone like me, and it is one of the reasons I chose to come forward to speak with you today. As you have seen by the numerous attached submissions from local veterinarians who felt strongly enough about the need for this change to submit letters to Township Council speaking to its merits, the practice of housing dogs in kennels and currently mandated by the bylaw can be detrimental to their health and well-being. I'd like to highlight an excerpt from the letter by Dr. Shane Bateman, emergency medicine and critical care faculty member of the Ontario Veterinary College and former chair of the board of the Guelph Humane Society. He states in his submission that research and clinical experience have shown that kennel environments can lead to elevated stress levels in dogs, increasing their susceptibility to illness and behavioral problems such as anxiety, reactivity, and aggression. In nurturing home-based environments where dogs receive individualized attention and care, dogs overcome behavioral challenges, gain confidence, and develop critical socialization skills. This not only improves the quality of life for the dogs, but also reduces the likelihood of surrendering to overburdened shelters and rescue organizations. Since COVID, our canine community has struggled with numerous behavioral problems as a result of poor socialization exacerbated by lockdowns. With an in-home option for dog care, skilled individuals such as myself will be able to work with difficult dogs to provide positive socialization experiences that meet their specific target needs, such as reducing aggression towards other dogs and people, reducing their reactivity to novel situations, and reducing anxiety, as Dr. Bateman has suggested. These dogs can be difficult for owners to place in kennel boarding situations, as Dr. Dieter suggested in her submission, so access to alternative options are a welcome opportunity for owners of these types of dogs. It is my hope that, together with your help, we can craft an addendum to the current bylaw that gives our community the option to access in-home care to ease these problems and provide an optimum space for dogs to stay while their owners are away. It has been my experience that this is a service that is desired by the community over traditional kennel housing. Which brings me to my last point, community. I take great pride in being a resident of Pusslands Township. It's been my experience that when dog owners feel they have a safe and welcoming environment to leave their dogs, they develop a sense of community. When humans are happy, their dogs are happy, and in turn, their dogs' neighbors are happy too. It may sound like a stretch, but I truly believe that any step that enhances community is a much needed step in the right direction. By supporting an amendment to allow for in-home dog care, Council will be providing an evidence-based option that promotes the health and well-being of animals that is not only needed but desired by local dog owners and promotes positive outcomes for the animals, their owners, and the Pusslands Township community as a whole. I thank you for your time, and I look forward to any questions you may have.
Thank you for your delegation. Sorry for being a bit late today.
Oh, that's okay.
Being patient. Councilor Hurst.
Thanks, Jennifer. Yeah, patience. Yeah, I think interesting. I appreciate you taking the time and effort to come forward and a lot of the background. I mean, I was going through the briefing notes, like you spent a lot of time going out and securing a lot of very positive feedback here. So I think, generally I'm supportive of recommending staff further explore this, talk to other municipalities that have the similar bylaw addition to like the larger kennel piece. I guess like a couple of questions that I would have, and I'm not sure about the answers, but I'm looking at this as this would be a business that provides a service.
Correct.
Not a kind of a recreational, I'll look after your dog for the day.
Correct,
Right?
yes.
Yeah. So I think that was one where I just wanted to get my head wrapped around, like, this is a commercial business providing a service as you articulate.
I think it could be. I think from my particular perspective, it would be, and I don't really know the terminology, so from my perspective, it would be a hobby, but I don't think I would be some like a grand scale. It's just me, so I don't really know the definition of commercial, but from my particular perspective, I think in general, having the addition to the bylaw certainly makes that a possibility for anybody else, but from my perspective, it would just be me.
Yeah, and fair, maybe commercials, maybe not the right way of saying it, with a fee for service.
That's perfect, yes.
Okay, I'm supportive of staff exploring this and reporting back, in due time.
Great, thank you.
Councilor Gordon.
Thanks for coming today. I am actually quite supportive of this approach. I can say, for my own self, if I was in a situation where I had to go and leave the dog, I'd be much more comfortable leaving it with somebody in their home as opposed to a traditional kennel setting. So I can appreciate all the evidence that you supported. And also, as your neighbor, I can also appreciate that you're trying to do a good thing.
Thank
that
you
you're
very much.
providing better options for dog boarding. In terms of amending the bylaw, my initial sort of, I read through it the one time and my initial thought was, well, maybe we just remove the section that says no kennel shall be located within any dwelling. But I think maybe there's a little bit more to that. I think we have to look at, what's the appropriate number of dogs, what's the licensing look like, the zoning, things like that. And maybe we can look to our neighboring municipalities who maybe already have something in place as a place to start. And I'm supportive of all of that. That being said, though, the work that will need to go into making that amendment is borne by staff. And I know staff have a huge laundry list of things that they're already working on. And so I'm not really sure how this work fits in, and I don't know if maybe our CAO could give some insight. Maybe this is something we look at when we review our corporate work plan. Where could we fit this in if council so chooses? I'm not sure. I would leave that for you to comment on, Courtney.
So through you, Mr. Chair, we could bring back some information around timing. for this through the corporate work plan. That's the right place to do it. We have a second officer that's coming on board in the later half of 2025. And so although does create work for onboarding, there might be opportunities with a second person to take a look at this. I do think that there is a different, I do think it would require an amendment to our bylaw and potentially additional licensing requirements. And I think staff want to get a good understanding of what that looks like. Right now, kennel licensing is quite time consuming. It is for staff to go through that annually. So I think we have to get understanding of what makes most sense, see what others have been doing, what the best practices are. My idea of timing is probably first quarter of 2026. That's likely timing. Now that also is dependent on workload capacities as we add to our bylaw department.
Thank you for coming, Jennifer. Nice to have somebody enthusiastic about a particular issue.
I definitely am. I'm very passionate about it.
Yeah, I certainly will support flavor around the table so far. I would agree with trying to get something done for a township. In your investigation, have you found any municipalities that do have bylaw changes to accommodate this?
And I was thinking about this earlier. I don't know which one, if it was Minto or Mapleton that I spoke with via email. They did say that they had one application for to use the amendment. It was for someone who had more dogs than what they had allowed personally. So I wasn't able to get any information back from any of the municipalities that I spoke with that they've actually enacted that piece of their bylaw in any other way except that. So
Certainly, if you find something, it'd be good to.
I sure will.
Staff, give them a leg up to get into this. Thank you.
Ms. Bailey?
Thank you. You just mentioned licensing. So is that a separate component to the kennel bylaw?
So if you, Mr. Chair, the kennel bylaw would set out the licensing requirements, but then the actual process of licensing is an annual thing that's done. Currently, it involves visits to kennels with staff, and we arrange that with our with the Cambridge Humane Society, who we partner with. So it is administering the license component has workload associated.
Okay. With the licensing in general, with how it works right now, because we have licensing with the current bylaw, are there qualifications? I don't know what your qualifications are for dog sitting. Maybe I'll ask you, do you have?
I have completed several courses with a trainer in California, Michael Ellis, but I don't have, in terms of dog trainers, I mean, kind of anybody can hang up a shingle and say, hey, I'm a dog trainer. So I wouldn't say that there is a particular badge that you get, or, at least not to my knowledge.
And maybe that'll come out if and when we have staff look into some stuff, but I can just see that being a bit of a barrier is how do we allow folks to take care of dogs in their homes? Do we need to know their qualifications now? Do they need a life, what will that look like in the future? Anyway, that's just something I was thinking of. I also just was curious how many dogs you're thinking when you have someone or have some dogs in your house.
I think that would depend on council's discretion.
Yeah.
I think that the limit for kenneling in a kennel situation, like a separate building, is 25.
Yeah.
So I think
what would you envision in your kitchen? In your house?
I would say probably 15. That would be sort of my guess. That would be my request, I would say. If that were something that I would be asked, that would be my response, would be 15. So I think that that's one of the things, in terms of the amendment to the bylaw, would be that there would be a change in the amount of dogs that you can watch, as opposed to a kennel situation.
And that would have some.
So through Mr. Chair, the one aspect, and I'm sorry I didn't touch on it earlier, which makes it a little more complex than some of our other regulatory bylaws, is there's a zoning component. And so
yeah, I was gonna ask what
kennels require site-specific zoning. They are not permitted as a right anywhere in the township.
Okay.
And that's because the high nuisance impact that often is associated with the use. So it would be more than just looking at the kennel licensing bylaw. It would be thinking about, from a zoning perspective, it's a land use, and we need to make sure that, land uses are compatible with where they're located, and again, not necessarily all businesses, have those impacts. We have home industries, we have home businesses that we allow through the bylaw. Again, they're allowed in specific areas in the township, but it's something that has to be considered, which is why it's a little bit bigger of a project to look at opening up a bylaw like this that has zoning implications.
And just as you're speaking, I'm wondering if there's a way to just, if we were saying, okay, we're limiting it to 5 dogs, does that now not engage the licensing or the kennel bylaw, but can it be put under a home industry?
So Mr. Chair, council
You
has
know.
been very progressive with the existing licensing bylaw, having retiring kennels. That's, no one else has that I'm aware of, where we recognize winding down and operations can look different. It doesn't just have to look like this typical commercial kennel. So in the spirit of kind of what the bylaw is already doing, that would be part of what we would look at.
Thanks for coming, Jennifer. I think you flagged something that, same thing. I would love my dog to be going to someone's kitchen.
I would too. Can I just speak to one of your points about credibility? And the only thing I'm just saying is because I don't know, in terms of actual kennels, I'm not sure what the requirements are of those people. So I would say they should be on par at the very least. Does that make sense?
Credentials, you're talking
That's,
around their
yeah,
credentials.
that's the word, not credibility, credentials. Yes, thank you for clarifying.
Yeah.
I think
We can
they
talk.
capture that by the standards that the animals live in, so you're very much judged on how the animals are kept and treated.
Yeah.
And then that's how you either get your license or you don't, so I don't know, is it the Canadian Kennel Association, maybe there is some
There are,
standardized.
there
body
are
that you have.
definitely in terms of kennels,
Yeah,
yes,
give you
there
a
are
plaque,
lots
like, et
of,
cetera,
measurements and air quality, all the, in terms of kennels. And so in this particular case, I'm not aware of anything, for in-home daycare. I'm not sure about that, so.
Yeah, I look forward to the staff reporting back. I have significant concerns though, like, and don't say where you live. Because this is video, goes on the internet, but you said Arkell, I mean, that could be in the middle of Arkell, that could be on the edge of the boundary. 15 dogs at a house in the middle of Arkell is at a high level right now, is pretty concerning to me. Because the waste, the noise, if they're stressful dogs, they bark a lot, like, this opens a big can of worms. I feel that when we did our kennel bylaw, we were very much so wanting them out in the rural where the impact of the neighbors is less, so. That's a lot of dogs in an old, if say it's in the old part of Arkell, small lots, so let's see what staff come back with. But I have significant concerns there, but in the rural, whether you house your dogs in a separate building or someone come inside, maybe there's some flexibility there. But I look forward to those conversations, but the zoning is concerning to me at this stage, so. Maybe not what you want to hear, but.
Can I just have one more? You were talking about timing before in terms of the first quarter of 26, and I do understand the constraints on staff. I can't even imagine how busy you are. As I spoke to in my notes, and the veterinarians who submitted on my behalf spoke to as well, there are several dogs in the community that are struggling in terms of their behavior. And by being able to help them, I am helping the community. I'm doing what my passion is, and I am very passionate about it. I would be very.
I know where you're going. You want it bumped up. You want it done soon.
All I'm saying is, if there's a way that we can find a common ground, and I can, I don't know, send pictures every day of my house. There are dogs that need my help. That's what I'm trying to say. And I don't want those dogs to wait. I'm gonna try not to cry here. Those dogs need my help, and they need it sooner than later. And what we've seen consistently is that that's not going to change. COVID brought about a big change. Everybody got a dog. Nobody had time to, or nobody had the access to training. And we've seen lots of dogs, that really struggle with, behavioral issues. So for me to, and that's one of the things, as far as my skill set is concerned, I have the ability as a dog trainer to bring dogs together and help them live cohesively. And that has shown, in my experience, to help them live cohesively in the community. So I would like to stress the importance from my own perspective and that of the dogs in the community, that if there's a way that I can sit down and meet briefly as possible, I know you're busy, to be able to do this sooner, I would be really grateful. And I can also say that from, and again, I understand your concerns, Mayor Seeley. I have neighbors that I could get them all to sign letters to say they're in compliance, every single neighbor that's around me. Most of them have already talked to me about their dogs, and I can certainly with 100% confidence say that in my, and again, this is part of the reason why I think the bylaw addendum is so important, because it's very specific. And I think because it's at council's discretion, it's not just a carte blanche, blanket saying yes to this. It's very specific to people. So I can give you a list of dozens of people who would be in support of my particular place. So
there may be the time for that.
Yeah.
And that you can't provide the list.
no, yes, that's true. That makes sense.
They need
But
to
yes,
submit that, but as you were mentioning, Courtney, I feel there should be a public engagement component of this if we're rewriting this bylaw. So staff will take it away. We have a lot of things going
I know
on.
you do,
So
yeah.
I know this affects you directly and it's very important to you. I understand that. The things that we're dealing with affect almost everyone.
Yep.
So I would have trouble directing staff to put yours to the front burner. I'm just being honest. right?
Yep.
Because the area concerns we have, Bill, the AMPS program, these
Yep.
are all things that are going to protect this community, from significant impact. So
Yep.
to shuffle, and we talk with staff, I'm telling you, if anybody would consider it, it's the person sitting right there. Okay, so
Yeah.
I have confidence in that, and I suggest we leave it with.
Okay. Can I just make one more comment? I have so many veterinarians who are skilled in this exact area who could provide lots of input as far as what is needed that might take the burden off of staff. Just a thought.
Of course, it doesn't really work that way. You have to look at it from a different lens. You have to look at it from a zoning, land compatibility
Yeah.
component. Again, neighbor impacts, community impacts, there's good planning. I mean, there's lots of times we hear things that this is a cure for cancer. I don't know, I'm just thinking that's, what I mean, but we have to, we just can't always support things. We have to look at it from another lens, but it's not a no, it's not a no.
Okay.
It's just, it has to go through the review and reports.
Can I ask if?
No.
I'm sorry. I'm going to ask. Last one. Just so I don't go home and, climb the walls waiting, will there be, is it like a month before I'll hear anything about a potential decision or some next steps? I'm
Well,
sorry. I know that's a
Right
bad
now,
question.
it's through the work plan, so we'll consider it through the work plan. We usually do that in the beginning of the first quarter.
Mhm.
So that meeting will happen in the first quarter, and that's where council can prioritize projects, and if it's going to be prioritized, that's likely, so I would say a couple months. I don't know, when's the work plan and.
Mr. Chair, I'd say we're aiming for the work plan in February if possible, so should be
Great.
coming forward soon.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Well, thanks.
Oh, can I just add one thing? I had asked a question before the meeting to staff about our current bylaw, and our current bylaw does say that no person shall keep more than 3 dogs per dwelling unit, and I had asked the question, does that mean dog sitting in home would be permitted for at least up to 3 dogs without a license? And the answer from staff was, yes, that would be permitted. Is that correct?
Through Mr. Chair, I think the answer yes was correct, that they need to be licensed. So
I see, yeah.
the
They're
way
not
the
there,
bylaw is written is, if you are keeping dogs, which the keeping has this very general definition.
Okay.
Whether it be permanent or temporary, they are required to be
Okay.
licensed. Now, that doesn't say they need to be licensed to you, but they need to be
Right.
licensed.
Within a township.
Oh, I'm misunderstanding that.
I was trying to find at least the dogs need.
The dog.
The dogs need to
Dogs
be
need-
licensed.
Yeah, so if,
You can take
if
free.
she had some really dogs that are really in need,
You got
could
three.
she potentially?
I have two of my own.
You have one.
Both of which, by the way, were dogs that came to me for the very same reason, and I ended up keeping them. So that's one of the hazards of being me, by the way. Thank you for asking that question. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I was thinking of the other way, but not the dog itself. I see the license.
No, I
Yeah,
was-
no, you're right.
I was wondering if there was at least maybe a
Three.
capacity for a small number of dogs in the meantime while we were.
Okay, well, we gotta go.
Complaint based.
That's all of our bylaws.
I appreciate you waiting to have your washroom break until after I spoke.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Move to second to receive that for information, please. Councilor Goyette, Councilor Spillis, all in favor? Harry, I believe, are we taking a break? Okay, 30 minutes?
Yes, so everyone online,
Are we speaking of 40 minutes? Make it two?
everyone that's,
Too long?
we are just taking a lunch break and we will be back in around 30 minutes.
All right, welcome back, everyone. The next item we're going to be dealing with is consent agenda. Do you have a recommendation?
Yes, the consent agenda items listed for the January 22nd, 2025 council meeting be received for information.
Except for 6.8.
You want to pull 6.8?
Yeah. I don't know if that would get me in trouble or not.
The exception.
Or I could just exclude myself.
6.8.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, I'm thinking, of course, yeah.
Okay, then we get a mover and second to receive those. Councilor Hurst, Councilor Bailey, any items you want removed?
I just had one very brief one, and it was item 6.7, the regional Waterloo water supply strategy, and I just saw in the note that Kyle Davis had been engaged with that, and my only request would be that at the appropriate time, can you give us an update? And I think the angle I'm looking at is a lot of those wellheads along Town Line Road draw water from the township, and I would say the residents in Woods Lynch Lake would be very interested as to what the region of Waterloo's long-term water taking strategy would look like. Again, I'll leave it with Kyle to kind of navigate that on our behalf, but I would appreciate just him being aware of that.
You good?
Through Mr. Chair, and just to make note, we're very lucky to have Kyle. We were not actively engaged. He happened to come across this. And then very quickly said, hold on, you know, in his role, there's definitely some, interested parties here where we want to consult. So we were able to identify that, and we've added what we think is an appropriate budget for that review, utilizing, our hydrogeologists as well, but it's just sort of a shout out to Kyle that he was looking out for us and we weren't actively engaged on that.
Well done. Thank you.
Perfect. Anything further on those items? All in favor?
Similar question.
Oh.
No, just similar question, so, thanks.
All right, all in favor? And then I'm gonna hand the gavel over to you for 6.8.
And through Mr. Chair, I will receive 6.7 as well at the same time, since we sort of pulled it to talk about it.
Sure.
Is that all right? Okay.
Sure.
Okay.
Hold on. Should I should change my pecuniary
Yes,
interest?
yep, we
and
can
add-
do that.
Okay,
Mhm.
so I'm declaring a pecuniary on item 6.8, as well as the original report, which was 9, and there were 2. Sorry, Madam Chair, I just wanted to
Okay.
verify that you're still good to go.
Okay, so we're doing, I'm giving this back. 6.8, any comments on the notice of application?
Of course, with staff, how does it figure into our process?
So through Mr. Chair, we're still working through timelines. it is best that we work concurrently on the review. The draft plan of subdivision approval authority is the county, and so, making sure that we are timing things is really important. Now, they have given us a date for comments, but again, what's unique to Plus Lunch and the county is that, the county does not retain its own, generally does not retain its own peer review consultants. So any technical comments that are required for the draft plan of subdivision come from the township's consultants. So in a way, they're sort of on our timeline for our peer review and as we do through things, because we submit our comments to them, which include the technical review, unless there's something specific that they would be looking at in relation to the OP or something that we wouldn't normally cover. But generally, it's going to be all of our comments provided to the county, which will form the technical review of the draft plan of subdivision. At the same time, we're using those same consultants to review our zoning bylaw amendment. So again, it makes most sense to have these things kind of running concurrently. With that said, we've already notified the county we won't be meeting their timeline for comments. It's just, they're large files.
My concern is what happened previously where they went ahead and did something and then were left, back in the back bench when they, put it up for approval.
To you, Mr. Chair, similar concerns from staff. So we are fortunate to have our own planning consultant now, who's very savvy with processes from other municipalities, and he's helping guide us.
Great, thank you.
How does the public engagement work for their process?
So through Mr. Chair, they are only required to send a notice of the draft plan of subdivision. Typically, if it was an official plan amendment, for instance, they would piggyback on our public meeting. And we would hold one for both. In this case, the subdivision doesn't require any public meeting, but they will do a notice. And then council has asked for a second public meeting that we hold. I did get a very quick update from the applicant. Seems like they're very agreeable to that, so.
And the county staff could attend the second public meeting? Would we invite them or?
Yes.
Yeah.
We'd likely invite them to, hopefully someone would come to both, because the zoning sets the framework for the subdivision. Really, they should be working together.
Any other comments?
Just sort of a follow-up question on that. If the plan of subdivision application was deemed complete, obviously prior to today, does plan of subdivision have the same timelines required as a zoning amendment?
Through Mr. Chair, no, it would have separate timelines. But again, a draft plan of subdivision, I believe, requires zoning approval before you can make a decision. I believe that's the order of things.
Guess what I'm curious about is if they haven't met some kind of time frame that they're required to, can it be appealed for non-decision at the county level, even though the township hasn't necessarily ended their allowable time yet? Just trying to reconcile how the two run in parallel.
So through Mr. Chair, they would have they're two separate processes, so there'd be appeal rights separately for both of them. And I really, there would be a pretty, there would have to be a very specific scenario that I'm thinking of where an applicant would appeal an application when it's still in active review. Because likely what would happen at the tribunal is they would say, go back and figure out the deficiencies. So I think we're okay, as really the primary thing is, are you moving along planning applications and are you seeing progress? Certainly for municipality, there's a significant delay that's not justified, that's a different story.
Okay.
Not yet. No movers.
Negative, or do you have anything to?
It's to receive consent agenda items 6.7 and 6.8
together. Okay, can I get a mover for that? Ms. Councilor Sabulis, seconded by Councilor Blair. All in favor? Back on you.
Thanks. All right, public meeting. January 22nd, 2025 at 7 p.m. Public information meeting held in person at the municipal office, 7404 Wellington Road 34. By electronic participation through Zoom regarding the following: 2025 proposed township budget, Zoning bylaw amendment application D14 BRU 4120 Wellington Road 35. See everybody there?
Just to know, I don't know if it's in our, agenda, it says January 17th. But not embedded. in the agenda.
I see that, yeah, that looks like an error. Okay, yeah.
Yep.
Okay, next is 9.1. Your recommendation for that one?
Yes, the report FIR 2025-001 entitled Fire Protection Grant Execution of Agreement be received. And the council gave 3 readings to bylaw number 2025-003, being a bylaw authorizing the entering into an agreement with the Ministry of Solicitor General, Office of the Fire Marshal of Ontario for the Fire Protection Grant.
Can you move for that, please? Councillor Hurst, Councillor Goya?
Yeah.
Any questions for Ms. Whitefox? See how I did that? 3 in there, under the bus. All right, all in favor? Carried. All right, next one, 9.2.1. Your recommendation, and we
That report FIN 2025-001 entitled the 2025 interim property tax levy and due dates be received, and the council gave 3 readings to bylaw number 2025-004, being a bylaw to provide for the levy and collection of the 2025 interim tax levy.
can you move for that, please? Councillor Hurst, Councillor Bailey, any questions for Ms. Hassan? Anything you need to add or desire to add, Ms. Hassan?
No, thank you.
Okay.
It's an annual report that we provide to council in order to bill our interim taxes, which I'm sure you're all aware of. So thank you very much.
In favor? That's carried. 9.2.2. Do you want to read the recommendation, please?
Yes, the Township of West Lynch audit for 2024 audit plan communication letter be received for information.
Are you gonna move it, please? Councillor Hurst, Councillor Spillis, anything you want to add to that one, Mrs. Sand?
No, again, this is an annual report that the auditors provide in order to discuss the audit plan with council. There's no significant changes in the report. It's very similar to previous years.
Questions or clarification? No, all in favor? That's carried. Next, you want to read the recommendation, please?
Yes, so just paraphrasing slightly because this is a very long recommendation.
just-
So that report ADM 2025-001 entitled the designation of the 2024 priority properties we received, and that council affirm its decision to designate the properties as outlined in the report, with the exception of 4726 Watson Road South, pursuant to section 29, part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. And that council give 3 readings to the bylaws attached as schedules to the report, being bylaws 2025-05 to 2025-025, excluding bylaw 2025-022, which is in relation to the Watson Road property. And that staff be authorized to proceed with notice requirements as outlined in section 29 of the Heritage Act in accordance with the Township's Ontario Heritage Alternative Notice Policy.
Anything in the mover for that, please? Ms. Post, Councillor Goya.
Yep.
I just want to make sure that the section 1 property isn't the same one that's listed here, is it?
No.
Okay, I just, oh, there, that's what I was looking for. Perfect. Sorry, I had to move in a seconder. Oh, yeah, come on.
Do you have questions?
Nope, I don't think so. You can keep walking, you might just do an about face and. So I had to move in a seconder?
Yes.
Any questions or concerns? No, all in favor? Carry, and then we have 1 to do individually.
So the next one would be that council affirm its decision to designate the property 4726 Watson Road South pursuant to section 29, part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act, and the council give 3 readings to bylaw 2025-002. And that staff be authorized to proceed with notice requirements as outlined in section 29 of the Heritage Act and in accordance with the Township's Ontario Heritage Act Alternative Notice Policy.
You can move it, please. Councillor Bailey, Councillor Hurst, any questions or comments? All in favor? Minus Councillor Breda, carried.
That's a good question.
Would you do that after I call?
Well, it's not about this, that's why.
Go ahead.
I just noticed, I think on this one of the properties is part of the same building. And I'm just curious how it's Enver's and then the barber shop
Oh,
next door, but that it's considered 2 properties, but shouldn't the structure be considered 1 building? anyway, I'm just wondering how that gets separated, or if that's an error, or like how that,
Like it's two legal addresses though?
yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, I think it does have to do with the role and the apportionment between our commercial properties are allowed to have a 0 setback. So likely what's happened is there has been a divide, and we can double check, but a divide of the actual parcel. And so, but even though it's all within.
Well, I think of Boston, and they have those houses that are all attached.
Yeah.
Each one would have an individual address, and you
Right.
could designate each one. This is similar. Sure, you know, it was
The
built
same
as one
facade.
building back in the
Yeah.
day, but at some point, maybe initially, or, you know, 100 years ago, they became separate legal parcels, but you're right, like they're continuous. I don't, not to refute what you're saying, but I don't see like a dividing line in the
Mhm,
middle.
yeah.
It's just, but they are two
Zero
separate.
setback, yeah, and maybe in the description, it makes reference to that, but I was just curious when I looked up the one property, I thought, oh, it's the same building, but it's two different addresses, and one's on here and one's not.
Okay.
Thanks for the discussion.
Okay. So, anyways, yeah, we'll figure that out. Okay. Next. 932, is that what we're on?
We did that one.
Let me just do that one. No, that was the delegate.
Yeah.
We moved that up and strike it out. 933,
So through Mr. Chair, again, this is on our agenda for the benefit of the delegate, earlier today. It was a report that a presentation council received in December, so it's just to receive for information.
thank you. Can I get a mover? Councilor Lewis, Councilor Hurst, all in favor? Carried. Oh, yeah, we haven't done this one, 9.4.1. Are we bringing Lena? She's over there.
Yes, great.
Hi, Lynn. How are you?
I'm good. How's everybody?
Great. All right, we're just dealing with the Heritage Lake release of securities. I'll have Ms. White Fox read the recommendation.
The report PD 2025-001 entitled Heritage Lake LP Release of Securities be received, and the council authorized the release of the remaining securities in the amount of $823,776.42 once any outstanding invoices are paid.
Okay, can I get a move? Please, Councilor Bailey, Councilor Hurst, any questions, or did anyone add, Ms. Banks?
Nope, that covers it pretty well. Thank you.
Great. Anything from council? Councilor Bailey?
Just a question, just confirming, ownership of the roads, maintenance of ditches, all of that, is that now responsibility of the township? Probably has been, but.
Through the chair, for condominiums, it's all privately maintained. So if it's a public road, it will be the road authority that has jurisdiction over the road. Ditches would be cleared by the township, but any roads within the condo corporation are the responsibility of the corporation.
That's a condo corp there.
So this
Yeah.
is private, that's
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
private in
Up to the
there.
gate, it's all theirs.
Oh, okay, I'm glad I asked. Okay, I
Yep.
thought that was something we were now taking on, but no. Okay,
The gates, I won't say, but yeah, you don't necessarily recognize that you're going into a private community there.
mhm.
So,
Okay, thanks.
okay, all in favor? Carried. Thank you.
Okay.
You're trucking along. The council reports, Ms. White Fox, is that where we're at?
Yes.
Mayor updates. Okay, let's see how well I can do at this. So we attended Roma, and we had 2 TAPMO delegations, two township delegations. So maybe start with the TAPMO ones. We had the PA to the minister, the MPP, I apologize for forgetting his name, but he represents either a new right or there is a recent by-election in Milton. Young gentleman, seemed very eager, and we expressed our concerns that you're all aware of, and he seemed very receptive of those. Likely not as informed as you know, their file. So that, I thought it went well with that delegation. Courtney, is there anything you really want to add?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think why he was resonating so much with the TAPMO group is I think a 3-time council member,
That's right.
3-term council member from Milton. So he sort of started with his opening remarks saying he normally sits on this side of the table, very much understands from the municipal perspective, which to Mayor Saley's point, being new, in that position can be helpful, but just in terms of how long that sort of lasts, once you get, I don't know if indoctrinated is the right word into the provincial, but, anyways, it was a very good first, meeting.
And remind me, in that one, were we spending some time talking about, ensuring the stability of our industrial park? I think that hit home. We were talking about illegal uses in, say, aggregate pits or even in the agricultural area, say, and how we have a thriving industrial park and this could lead to a competitive edge. And I saw a bunch of pens, jotting down notes. So it went well. I mean, it's 15 minutes, as you know. And then we had a Tatmo one. Did we do two Tatmos that day?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Minister of Finance was Tatmo and then the MNR was Tatmo.
Okay, and then is similar, so first one was it MOM? So that's why we focus on the finance, and then the second one, MNR again, just expressing our concerns around non-compliance, non-enforcement, same rhetoric, just expressing that we want a gravel pit as a gravel pit. They were both received well. And similarly with the Puslinch delegations, we had PA, Dawn, I forget her last name. Also, very receptive. She did state that we need your gravel to build Ontario. I did not say at what cost, but we just expressed our concerns around illegal use, lack of enforcement. I was pretty frank. I said, we're being told from your side of the table that you're hiring officers, you're enforcing, and we're not seeing that transpire in Puslinch. We're not seeing that. Maybe there's been inspections, but there's not the enforcement component. So she was very receptive of that. Again, I feel they're indoctrinized. Is that what the word?
Maybe not the right word, but it's
But,
the word I used, yeah.
Yeah, I agree. She's new to the file and it's a lot to learn. And then we had a 15-minute break. We were back in there with Tatmo. And the Puslinch, we focused on specifics of the concern. And then Tatmo was more generalized, and Calvin's having concerns around the ancillary or auxiliary uses, still hit that same messaging points. But generally they went pretty good. I think we made an impression. So, back to the MLF one, I did say, we were focusing on, you don't want to see further erosion of the Wellington Appeals win. And, a big part of our win was that the ruling stated that MPAC can't rely on the self-reporting. We didn't want to go back to the self-reporting because A, would erode the ruling that Wellington won, and B, it's documented in the ARB hearing that there was some misrepresentations. That's not slander, it's documented there. So I just highlighted our concerns with an industry reporting on their own taxes as being problematic. So it was good. We'll see if we get any action out of it. Right, and then MTO was with senior staffer. That was Tuesday at 2:00. And, they said they're still committed to the phase approach. They mentioned concession 7 bridge and the Hanlon improvements, and what she did mention, the hydro wires. So when I had my opportunity to speak, I said, well, I could argue that the concession 7 bridge was for the aggregate industry and the improvements to the Hanlon were needed just to improve the Hanlon. And she mentioned that the hydro wires, the raising, I don't think they're moving them, they're raising them. Whether that means move them and raise them, will commence in early 25. And I believe that's a direct relation to the southern part of the bypass. They don't need to raise the wires to widen the 401. They need to raise it. If you recall that AI generated flyover that they created over one bridge or ramp to go, I guess, westbound. So if you were coming north and try to go westbound on the 401, the wires would be too close. So that's why they have to raise it. So direct relation to the bypass. So that's good to hear. We did still say we would like to see this moving along faster. And then we switched and focused more on the improvements of Highway 6, saying that, we need a crosswalk in Morriston to connect the two sides of the streets. you guys dealt with that potential subdivision on, behind Old Morrison Park, and then we have Whitcomb Way that's built out, so connecting everybody to the recreation facility is important right now, that's challenging, plus Courtney brought up the walkability for the businesses, and then we brought up, the stoplight at concession 1, how challenging it is for people to get out, and then we would be willing to, close, so we're not stoplight at concession 1, stoplight's at Leslie. Concession 1 comes down by Brian's, I think it's Leslie right there. So we, you know, that would help facilitate people trying to get across the highway, because either there's a wall of stopped cars, or there's just too much volume to get out. And, you know, they mentioned that it's very focused on the data, and if it qualifies, and you could cause, what did she say? Did you say higher risks? or-
Unintended or unanticipated risks from signaling, putting a signal in where there wasn't already. So they're just very cognizant of adding risk or adding.
So they didn't have the data available yet?
No, yeah.
Did they say when that would be available?
Not that I recall.
You're Mr. Chair, I think that we do want to have that concession 1 road closed because it's getting a lot of detour traffic, and I think we want to show the full impact during traffic. Okay.
I believe our other representatives from MTO, or last I counted, they had the RFP out to do the traffic data. Whether it's happened or not, we can follow up with Robert, I believe is right. So, and she mentioned another individual we should connect with.
I think it's the director of their operations division, which would be somebody who is in charge of making decisions related to existing infrastructure. So because it's existing, there might be a different staff member that might be great to connect with, so.
So we mentioned that we understand putting the stoplight is gonna have impacts on the flow of traffic. Flow of traffic's already pretty horrible, so it's a matter of just trying, and say similar with the analogy of, you know, you might get rear-ended. I didn't want to say this, but a lot of times cars are stopped, bumper to bumper, so.
Yeah.
And that's the problem trying to get out from Leslie is there's never an opportunity, right? So anyways, it was done well. And, Ted Arnott, attended. It was nice to see him because this could be or likely is his last Roma. So we thanked him for, you know, representing us and appreciated working with him, and he was in good spirits. And then he made jokes about his resume. He's been MVP for 30 years. The first employment be the grocery store and an MVP for 36 years, right? So we had some good chuckles with him, but it was nice to see him. So I think that's pretty much it. Do we do mayors and council members? Anything from council members? Megan, move her to second, receive that for information, please. Councilor Hurst, Councilor Spillis, all in favor? That's carried. Final announcements by funds. That's a lot of them. As presented.
That the following bylaws be taken as read 3 times and finally passed in open council. So it's bylaw 2025-003, authorized entering into an agreement with UFM. Bylaw 2025-004, being the interim tax levy bylaw. And then we have our designation bylaws, which are bylaw 2025-005 through to bylaw 2025-025, with the exception of bylaw 2022. We'll take that out for Councilor Boyda.
Okay. Megan, move it for please. Councilor Hurst, Councilor Spillis, all in favor? Okay.
And then, the following bylaws be taken as read 3 times and finally passed in open council, and it's bylaw 2025-022, being a designation bylaw for the property municipally known as 4726 Watson Road South.
Please, Councilor Hurst, Councilor Bailey, all in favor? Carried. Any announcements? Oh,
You did not include bylaw 26.
No.
No, thank you. Yes. Sure.
Yeah.
good. Okay, any announcements?
Family days.
No.
Oh,
Say that again?
I think we mentioned last time, but family days. Coming up.
What's the date?
I didn't know about 7. Was on the 17th.
February 17th. Sure there'll be some events at the community center. The closed session, business arising from the closed session we didn't have. This motion? New business. Affirmatory bylaw?
That the following ballot is taken as read 3 times and finally passed through the council. Ballot 2025-027 being a ballot to confirm the proceedings of council for the corporation of the township of Pleasant at its meeting held on the 22nd day of January 2025.
Mover, please. Councilor Coyle? Yep. Councilor Wilson, all in favor? Carried. And German.
Council hereby adjourns at 2:28 p.m.
Councilor Hurst, Councilor Bailey, all in favor? Carried. See you at 7 o'clock or a little before.